Great. All right. Yeah, let's give it about another minute before I call to order. Thanks for your patience, everybody. 02 p.m. This is a special meeting of the Select Board, July 20th, 2020. My name is Jesse Kreitzer. I'm the chair of the Marlboro Select Board, and Aaron Betts is with us, Select Board member. Julia Von Ranson, the vice chair of the Select Board, is not able to join us tonight, but we do have quorum, so we can begin. First, Aaron, I don't know if you have any changes in the agenda that you'd like to make.
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to public comment. First, just a bit of housekeeping. I want to go over, I'm sure a lot of new folks joining us tonight, just some of the rules of procedure for public participation. So number one, members of the public shall be afforded a reasonable opportunity to express opinions about matters considered by the body, so as long as order is maintained according to these rules. Two, comment by the public or members of the body must be addressed to the chair or to the body as a whole, and not any individual member of the body or the public. Members of the public must be acknowledged by the chair before speaking. Number four, if a member of the public has already spoken on a topic, they may not be recognized again until others have first been given the opportunity to comment. Order and decorum shall be observed by all persons present at the meeting. Neither members of the body nor members of the public shall delay or interrupt the proceedings or the peace of the meeting, or interrupt or disturb any member while speaking. Members of the body and members of the public are prohibited from making personal, impertinent, threatening, or profane remarks. Members of the body and members of the public shall obey orders of the chair or the other presiding member. I do ask that you keep your remarks brief and succinct, and try to keep it to 3 minutes, although there will not be a time limit forcefully imposed, but try to keep it under 3 minutes if you can. If you plan to participate in public comment, please click the hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. And Zoom attendees will be recognized based on your placement in the gallery view on my end, and everyone will have an opportunity to speak. So put the hand up. If you don't, that's okay. I'll still go around and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate before we close public comment. After public comment, the Select Board will welcome the Degrees of Freedom team. If you have specific questions that you'd like answered or that are part of your remarks, I ask that you also submit them in writing in the chat section. And when the Degrees of Freedom team is recognized, we'll do our best to address them. The Select Board will also make the chat transcript from this meeting public after the meeting, and will request that any unanswered questions be responded to in writing by the Degrees of Freedom team and shared with the Select Board before a regular Select Board meeting on August 13th. That said, I'd like to open public comment and thank you all for being here. I'd like to recognize Edie Moss. Edie, you're muted and you're recognized. No public comment. Staley, is that Staley McDermott? You're recognized. You have public comment? No. I have Ruth. Hi, Ruth. You're recognized. Public comment, and you're muted.
Not right now.
Thank you. Jean Boardman, do you have a public comment? You're muted. It looked like a no. Okay, thanks. Lynn Perna, hi, you're recognized. And muted.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Just a formality. I'm sure we have a lot to say, but I'd love to be able to start the meeting by taking a moment to recognize the passing of John Lewis, a peaceful warrior and someone that we can take advice from today by being civil and but not forgetting that he wants us to speak out. It's great that we're here. I urge people who are not comfortable speaking like myself to speak out. This is his legacy, and I'd like to think about that for a minute. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Mark, and you're muted.
I have
no comment. Martin Robertson, do you have a public comment? Martin?
not at this time.
Thank you. Dan, hi, Dan MacArthur, you're recognized.
Thank you, Jesse. I somewhat want to echo what Lynn Perna just said. I was brought up in the Marlboro College community among the faculty and the students in the early days. And I hope that today we can all adhere to the ethos that was such an important part of the beginnings of Marlboro College and extends on today into this community. Being respectful, treating each other as fellow human beings, disagree with others when necessary, but remember that we're all part of the same community and expanding Marlboro community. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dan. Alice Grossman, do you have public comment? And you're muted. A thumbs up or down would be fine too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to just begin by saying that my personal history is I'm a graduate of Marlboro College, and I'm also a retired high school teacher of 27 years. I have a master's degree in education from Lesley College, and what I've seen in my years of being a student and a teacher is that it's very important to respect the students. And I personally had no idea what Democracy Builders was about until I started reading Black and Brown at Democracy Prep and their testimonies. And I have to say, I was very disturbed by what I read. In all my years of teaching, 27 years, I never had an inkling, I never heard of anything like the kinds of practices that went on there. It seemed more like a prison or a military school than a high school. I know from my experience when there was a transgression at my school, depending on how bad it was, the student would go to a disciplinary committee, which was made up of students and faculty and administration. And a punishment was put out, either a detention or suspension or whatever. But when I heard that people, I don't know why this stuck out to me, that somebody would get detention for having their shirt untucked, that just made my jaw drop. And I didn't understand the whole ethos of this place suddenly, this organization suddenly. And I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Nigel G. I support DOF. Nigel G., do you have public comment?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Bob Anderson, do you have public comment? Nancy Anderson, public comment? No. Lindy Corman.
Not right now, thanks.
Thanks. Shakira O'Kane, do you have public comment?
Hi, and thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your time today. My name is Shakira O'Kane, and I was employed at Democracy Prep from February 28th, 2011 through June 30th, 2012 as a college counselor. And then from July 1st, 2012 through March 1st, 2013 as a senior college counselor there as well. My primary reason for joining and commenting today, I should say in solidarity with Black and Brown ITP, is to put a face and a name to what has been generally mischaracterized and diminished as an anonymous kind of cancel culture movement. So face name. My secondary purpose is because I'm genuinely interested in Seth Andrews and Seth Andrew and the Democracy Preps Builder representatives, seeing what they're going to represent with respect to both the response to some of the inquiries that Black and Brown have put forth, and then also the plan for degrees of freedom. And with respect to the anonymity piece, my hope is that there's no more energy that is put toward discussing that and trying to discredit the hundreds of students, staff, and families, and more focus is being directed, especially in this meeting, as we hear from folks, around the accountability, atonement, and a way forward. I see that there are a number of people who are in support of degrees of freedom, and I'm hopeful the day that we will hear
I just lost.
that they are making concerted efforts to ensure that degrees of freedom is founded with an anti-racist framework in mind. And that is just more, and that is more, I should say, than just making sure that there are people of color on the board. That is more than making sure that there are going to be people of color kind of at the outset and in the front. But that is actually actively looking at policies, procedures, how things are going to work at this kind of location, this college, given what we have heard and what I personally experienced at Democracy Prep Charter High School, right? And so I'm very interested to see kind of what is going to be said here specifically around how that same ethos that lived and existed and perpetuated at Democracy Prep while I personally was there will not be taking place at Degrees of Freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Lissa Harris, do you have public comment?
I do. Thank you, Jesse. I have a prepared statement.
Do we want the video or not?
Please mute, sir. Thank you.
My name is Lissa Harris, and I am a founding member of the Coalition for Black and Brown Students in Marlboro, Vermont. I am also on the Marlboro School Board. I'm going to speak directly to the Democracy Builders Degrees of Freedom Design Team members who are on the call tonight. I'm glad that you asked for this meeting with our town. I wish you had asked for it prior to talking to the Brattleboro Reformer and the Commons newspaper. If you had, you would have known that not all of us are interested in only saving Marlboro College, that not all of us are opposed to any changes at the Marlboro College campus, and that not all of us are canceling what you are attempting to build here in our town. What we are looking for is accountability. Most of you have had some connection with the Democracy Prep charter schools. We believe the stories that are coming out of the collective Black and Brown at Democracy Prep. We believe them because we see the same stories of abuse and racism coming from students and faculty at Success Academy and KIPP, and because we know the retribution that can occur for people of color who speak out against their oppressors. We've seen that retribution in Minneapolis and Kentucky over the last few months. Both the non-anonymous and the anonymous testimony we received from former and current students and faculty at Democracy Prep gave us grave concerns about how you will run your new Degrees of Freedom program at the Marlboro College campus. We will not allow Black and Brown bodies to be subject to the same no excuses educational model that has plagued Democracy Prep, and we demand accountability. We've compiled a list of specific requests that we believe will assure us that Democracy of Freedom is promoting educational equity, cultural cohesiveness between its student population and its education model, and maintaining fiscal sustainability in order to be a viable part of our townscape. These are our requests. 1, that at least 2 Marlboro residents be on the Democracy Builders Fund Board chosen by the Select Board. 2, that the student and faculty handbook be posted on the website and accessible to the public. 3, that yearly dollar reparations be given to Black and Brown at DP to distribute to families as they see fit. 4, access to budgets for the first 5 years of operations. 5, transparency around funding sources, including any federal or state grants and any reporting requirements. 6, full transparency around student and staff recruitment. 7, full list of board members, including terms of office and year joined. 8, full transparency around growth and sustainability plan. 9, full transparency around formal structures for community, student, and family input. And 10, description and documentation of a formal role for Seth Andrew, including an evaluation process from the Board of Trustees. I will post these in the chat, and I'm also happy to email a copy to you all so that we can all be clear about what our expectations are. I'm looking forward to getting to know you and becoming intricately familiar with your program design process over the coming weeks and months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Patricia Hesselbach, you have public comment and you're muted. I'll move on. Oh,
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute myself. Hi, good evening. My name is Patricia Hasselbach. I am a former parent alum of Democracy Prep. My daughter was one of the founding children in Democracy Prep. It was an incredible experience for her, for myself, being engaged in the school. I'm in full support of the next mission, which is Degrees of Freedom, for Mr. Andrew and his team and what he's working on. I'm going to try to keep it brief. If it weren't for Democracy Prep at the time when I was looking for a middle school for my daughter, the only option was for me to, as a single mother, take on extra jobs and put her in a private school or send her to a failing school in our neighborhood, in our district. Democracy Prep opened up so many opportunities for her, and still serve as mentors, and she's engaged with them to this day, and I believe she's on the call and she can speak to that as well. And I've heard about the website where they were talking about racism. As a person who will not stand for racism, I can tell you I have never, in my many years working, being a part of the school, as a parent, experienced anything in that nature. And they've, like I said, it's just an amazing school and gave great opportunities to a lot of children.
Jesse, you're muted.
Thank you. Liz, you're recognized. You have public comment.
Thank you. So my name is Liz, and I teach 5th and 6th grade at Marlboro Elementary School. And when I first heard of Democracy Builders and its plan to move to the college campus, I was intrigued by the school's mission, specifically of the part about expanding civic education and advocacy. I myself believe very deeply in teaching civics and engaging students in democratic practices, as my former and current students could definitely tell you. So the idea of a school placing an explicit focus on preparing scholars to become active citizens and leaders in our democracy sounds seriously incredible. And while there are accounts of students achieving academic success and engaging in meaningful civic learning opportunities at the Democracy Prep schools, and I'm thinking specifically of the senior capstone projects I read about that were completed by students at the DP at Agassiz campus in Las Vegas. More and more accounts are being shared that detail the lived experiences of Brown and the DP system. Students and former faculty members recount the harm and trauma and racism they faced within the schools, and no amount of incredible sounding civics curriculum can negate testimonies. Since the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, a wider range of people in this country have finally woken up to racial injustice and the prevalence of white supremacy. And many teachers in schools are now, rightly so, turning their attention to anti-bias, anti-racism training for staff so schools can work to become anti-racist institutions. I personally believe that it's crucially important that teachers, admin, and support staff do the serious and sustained work of becoming anti-racist individuals before trying to jump in and change the institution as a whole, and without first taking time to interrogate one's own implicit and unconscious biases, reflect on one's own education and teaching practices, and seriously committing to self-education on issues of race, racism, white supremacy, and systems of oppression. A teacher could inadvertently cause harm, feed into oppressive systems, or perpetuate racism. Doing the work is difficult, and it takes a lot of time. And I bring this up now because Seth Andrew admitted himself in his essay on Medium that he has some work to do around recognizing and addressing his own implicit biases and his role in perpetuating systemic racism. And if teachers need to take time to do the work, I'm thinking that that should take some serious time before jumping in and opening an entire educational institution. If the sale goes through, which at this point I object to, but that could change, I would like to know how Seth is doing the work and what it means, and what measures will be put in place at Democracy Builders to hold him and the rest of the administration and staff accountable. I would like to know what measures will be in place to evaluate Seth and other admin, and who will oversee the hiring of teachers or professors, and what systems will be in place so that students, families, and staff members can come forward with concerns without the fear of being dismissed or replaced. Should the sale go through and the school open as planned, questions need to be answered and specific measures need to be put in place that will hold the team at Democracy Builders accountable to ensure that no further harm is done to students. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia Morris, do you have a public comment? And you're muted.
Thank you, I do. I appreciate you. I apologize for not having the video, so I hope you can hear me well. My name is Kaya Morris, and I am a former state representative that served in the legislature from 2014 to 2018. I am also the former director of the Vermont Coalition for Ethnic and Social Equities in Schools, and I'm currently the Movement Politics Director for Rights and Democracy. I'm calling in today off of the request of several community members, as well as some of our statewide officials who have been deeply concerned, terribly troubled, and are quite frankly alarmed at both the expediency and the concerns for a lack of praxis coming from the people who are foundationally building this institution of higher education, which will ultimately require for students to engage in activities and engage in our communities in ways that will not set them up for success. Now, this is what is important to understand about our measurement of success and where we're coming from as Rights and Democracy. We are 100% committed to the eradication of white supremacy. That eradication requires that we deeply interrogate, hold deeply accountable and visibly accountable those institutions which seek, through their design, to continue the upholding of white supremacy. As it currently exists in our school systems, I want to also echo what the previous person just said, that there was initially a point of potential celebration for a school, a college, an institution of higher education that's looking to do that deep work that we are on the ground fighting for every day. It sounds great on its face. The concern is that we have a history of those very same architects having zero praxis for ensuring that their work is anti-oppressive. We stand in solidarity with all students, not just those who have been disproportionately impacted, but understand that we will vanguard their safety, we will support their educational experiences, and we will wrap our arms around the communities that will be impacted by these missteps, these mistakes. We expect no one to come with perfection, especially if you have not done the work previously, then we don't expect you to succeed in this realm. But understand as well that anything that is going to be a solution that is meant to support those who are, while being the global majority, impacted by all systems of oppression, because white supremacy is not just around racism. It is around ableism. It is around homophobia. It is around ageism. It is around anti-poverty work that we need to do. So many different systems are all impacted and find their nexus at the heart of white supremacy. So the mistakes you're making there, you're making in many other places too. And those are things on which we cannot stand for. Those solutions that are meant to be liberatory for us need to be developed by us. And this is why you're experiencing the backlash that you're experiencing right now. Because the community members who are most impacted, the folks that actually live in this state, the ones who are again getting arrested, protesting your kind of actions, the people who are out there grinding themselves to the bone, parents who do not have the time and the capacity to continually fight against these systems, but are doing so for the very survival of their youth, cannot take on further work from a group that has no interest in doing that work. So at the heart of this, again, is the need for the end of white supremacy and white supremacy culture. The issues of systemic racism and systemic suppression are already rampant in our institutions of higher education here. So understand that many students come here They live here, are born and raised here, or they are brought here from programs outside of the state to come and be a part of the Vermont community. And what happens is they are coming face to face with the very ugliness that has been the centrality of how student education is led. This is a problem because these students leave here heartbroken and enraged and never wish to return. That is not an investment that our state should be making in any way, shape, or form. It's one that will cause further trauma and drive those people who have every right to deserve and have a fruitful experience, a nurturing educational opportunity, and a pathway towards a just future. Be just stripped from them because folks just didn't care and were more interested in the money. We are here and we will be happy to help organize folks to support around ensuring that those students, those faculty are well cared for, and to ensure that our state is continually moving forward and pushing forward in this very moment in time, which is so, so critical, to make sure that the things that you are purporting, you are actually delivering on. And when you fall short, we will be there to show you a mirror. I want to thank you for having this opportunity to speak. I wish, again, it didn't have to be under duress or by force, that you felt compelled to do so, because these are conversations that you could have had months ago. So I wish you the best of luck in this process, and I wish everyone that chooses to be involved in this institution to know that there are many, many in the state who will stand behind you and help support you when they fall short on the promises that they're purporting to deliver.
Kaya, thank you. It's 5:28. We've allocated 20 minutes for public comment, and clearly we are going to extend that. So I'd like to make a motion to extend public comment for an additional 60 minutes. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I'd like to recognize Hamilton Boardman. Hamilton, do you have public comment?
No comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth Andrew, would you like to participate in public comment or wait for the next portion of the meeting?
Happy to wait for the second portion. Thanks.
Thanks. Mary, you're recognized and you're muted.
Yeah. Hi, I'm just here to learn, listen and learn. Thanks.
You bet. Okay. Let's see. Moving down. Brian Whitehouse, you're recognized. Do you have public comment? I think that's a no. No. Oh, thank you. Charlie's iPad. Do you have public comment? Excuse me. I'll keep moving. Emma Shrefkin. Emma, you're recognized. Do you have public comment?
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
I've prepared a statement, so I'll get to that now. I'm a resident of Marlboro. I grew up here and attended the Marlboro Elementary School. Obviously, this community is very important to me, and having heard the allegations about the racist abuse that has been enacted by Democracy Builders founder Seth Andrew, I can absolutely say that we do not tolerate this kind of behavior in our community. If the Marlboro College sale has already been set in stone, I believe it is of the utmost importance that we request that Seth Andrew step down from his role. And if he does not comply with this request, then must be held accountable for paying reparations to the students, families, faculty, and staff members who have been traumatized by his role in the institution. Additionally, I think we should ensure that the leadership and hiring process mirrors the demographic of the student body, and that the Marlboro community is integrated in this process. We must remember that we are already living on stolen land stolen from brown indigenous people. Is your work institution going to acknowledge this? These are also questions I might have had for Marlboro College as well, but it's important for us to look at these moving forward. And the purpose of having a school having a school in a rural, mostly white community to run away from your controversial past in your democracy prep schools in Harlem. What does opening this school in our rural landscape assist in Democracy Builders' vision and curriculum? I wonder why you haven't reached out to our community to see if we are indeed a town fit for your school. I would love to believe that Vermont is this absolute liberal cornerstone, but I know that many Black and brown people are made to feel uncomfortable by the silence and hidden agendas of white liberals in the area, not to mention our incarceration numbers that reflect otherwise. I'm confident in Marlboro's community standards, but I question why Seth hasn't done the work to make sure that this is the type of community that his students will feel empowered and supported by. The way that Marlboro must show that Black Lives Matter is not by not letting someone who has caused trauma on Black and brown students to enter our community. I wonder if Seth Andrew, as someone who believes in the vision of Democracy Prep as its founder, wouldn't step down from his position and transition leadership into the hands of individuals who reflect the demographics of the school. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for any folks who are just joining us now, if you do have public comment, please know that I'm just recognizing folks based on their queue in my gallery view. So everyone will be recognized, and we will extend public comment until everyone has a chance to speak who wishes to do so. I'd like to recognize Ariel Poster, and you're muted.
Thank you, Jesse. I grew up in Marlboro, and I'm a founding member of the Coalition for Black and Brown Students in Marlboro, Vermont. I stand in solidarity with Black and Brown at DP. Thank you to the Degrees of Freedom leadership for calling this meeting and finally engaging with the community. I am here tonight because I've been listening to the voices of Black and Brown at DP Collective and the stories of harm, abuse, and racism they experienced during their time at Democracy Prep. I want to know if you too are listening to these voices and taking them seriously. As a white woman, I recognize that I have benefited from the systemic racism that we face in this country, and therefore, it's my responsibility to amplify the voices of those who have been oppressed by these systems. I read the recent interviews in The Reformer and The Commons where it sounded like the Degrees of Freedom team was attempting to discredit Black and Brown at DP because the allegations are mostly anonymous and because you all had positive experiences at your time at Democracy Prep. The fact that some people went through the school without having negative experiences in no way disproves the allegations coming from Black and Brown at DP. Marginalized voices don't always speak out when they experience trauma because they don't always feel like they have the power to, and because reporting it can often cause more trauma. That doesn't mean we shouldn't listen when they're finally brave enough to speak. By questioning their legitimacy, we diminish their lived experiences of abuse and silence their voices further. This is another form of abuse. 764 Vermonters signed a petition to stand in Black and Brown at DP. The petition called for the cancellation of the sale to Democracy Builders because your leadership has yet to demonstrate how you plan to repair past harms and do things differently this time. The petition reads, "We should have been speaking out in defense of these voices when they were kids and the harm was happening. We can't make excuses or go back now, but we have an opportunity to stand with them as adults and help ensure that this kind of abuse is not perpetuated, not in Marlboro, Vermont, or anywhere else. If we are silent, we too are complicit in perpetuating systemic racism and abuse. We, the concerned members of this community, want to know how Degrees of Freedom plan to repair past harms and provide a safe and anti-racist space for your students. We want to see yearly dollar reparations given to Black and Brown at DP to distribute to families as they see fit. We want to see an independent investigation into the allegations of racism and abuse. We want to see the majority of the leadership of Degrees of Freedom match the demographics of the student base you plan to serve. We want to know how you plan to not repeat past mistakes if so far your staff and leadership are all coming from Democracy Prep. We want to hear what formal structures of community, student, and family input you plan to use so that people feel comfortable coming forward with complaints. Thank you for taking the time to listen and engage with this community. We hope you will be transparent, take full responsibility for past mistakes, and communicate directly with this community moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Adrian Seeger.
Thank you, Jesse. I've lived in Marlboro since 1978, and I taught at Marlboro College from '83 to '93. And so I have two sort of hats in this game. As some of you know, I was working to try to save Marlboro College on Potash Hill for many months. And that is probably over. As far as we know, the sale is going to go through. The sale of the campus is going to happen to Seth, and Marlboro College assets and programs, such as it is going to move in some fashion to Emerson in Boston. But the other hat that I wear is a hat of being a resident in this town and being really worried about the fact that that Seth and his crew are going to, unless it's extremely likely that Seth and his crew and Degrees of Freedom will be at the Marlboro College into the foreseeable future. And I want to take a little different tack here from many of the other speakers who I, thoroughly agree with their sentiments, and just talk for a moment about Seth himself from another angle. And even though some of us have just only met Seth in the last month or so, and that sort of tangentially or on Zoom and so on, it's pretty obvious that he's a really smart and personable person, and on the surface, as multiple people have testified, a really likable guy. And the problem is that underneath the surface, if you dig underneath the surface, and I've never said this publicly about anybody in my life before, he's an extremely good liar, and he's very good at not getting caught. And I came to this conclusion very quickly when the sale was announced at the end of May. I have been involved in nonprofits for decades, been on the boards of them continually and so on. And the great thing about nonprofits, if you're trying to find out about them, is that their tax returns are publicly available. The IRS publishes them. So I went on the website and looked up the tax returns for Democracy Builders and Democracy Builders Fund eventually, which is actually the entity buying the campus. There are two nonprofits that Seth runs. Within a few minutes, it was like these tax returns are really bizarre. And they were bizarre for a number of reasons. The first obvious reason was that there weren't any recent ones on file. The most recent tax return on file, and I checked today, this is still true, is for 2016. So there are at least 2 years, and about the one legal thing that nonprofits have to do to stay out of trouble with the IRS is file a tax return every year, like all of us have to do. And those tax returns, as I said, are public. So, I'm thinking, well, this is there's probably some innocent explanation for this. And Seth went on Facebook, on a public Facebook group within a day or two of the announcement, and said, I'm here. I'm very friendly. I'll talk to you about anything, answer any questions. And I asked him, and I said, and I wasn't really thinking too much about this. I said, this is, your financials are weird. There are no recent financial tax returns available on file, unlike just about every other nonprofit, that you can think of. And Seth immediately said, well, that's because it takes over 2 years for the IRS to put tax returns it receives on the website. And, and that's simply untrue. It's typically a few months. I mean, you can Google that. And then he started talking about other things that Democracy Builders had done, the Democracy Prep, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and so on. And he kind of changed the subject. So I asked him again, I said, but that's great, but where are the tax returns? And again, he changed the subject and started talking about, we just got this $10 million grant for one of our charter schools, the Democracy Prep charter schools. And so I said, Seth, you're not answering the question. This is a really straightforward, simple question for any nonprofit. Where are the tax returns? And at that point, he said, and I will quote from the actual thing. He said, sorry, Adrian, I'm not avoiding anything. I don't think we're going to be much more productive here, so I'm going to log off. And again, that's public information. So at that point, I'm suspicious. It's like, why on earth are you?
I'm sorry to interrupt. You've exceeded 4 minutes at the moment. If you could just try to wrap up.
I will do that. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Jesse. We've asked for those tax returns. Nonprofits are legally required to provide them when you ask for them in person, and Democracy Builders has ignored the requests. The other thing, the other way that Seth has demonstrably lied is that he has said, both in his own writing and at a Marlboro Town of School Board meeting a couple of weeks ago that he left Democracy Prep in 2013. And yet the IRS tax returns for Democracy Prep shows that he was paid over $200,000 in fiscal year 2016 and another $200,000 in June fiscal year 2017, 4 years after he says he left, and that he is titled superintendent. And my closing remark is basically, I would warn this town and urge this town to be very cautious about anything that Seth Andrew tells us or does not tell us about when we have interactions with him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. James Mead, do you have public comment?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Jalen Cox, you're recognized. Do you have public comment?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jalen Cox. I'm here on behalf of Emerson College's POWER, which stands for Protesting Oppression with Educational Reform, as well as our multicultural organization, Flawless Brown. I'm here because we stand in solidarity with Black and Brown at DP. In reading the cruel and traumatic stories and experiences that have been shared online, we believe that students of color, as well as their parents, teachers, faculty, and staff simply deserve respect and support in and from their schools, especially in the journey towards a just future. And we stand with Black and Brown DP to make sure that Democracy Builders is truly and authentically held accountable.
Thank you. Sydney Logan, you're recognized.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sydney Logan. I am a student at Emerson College. I am also the Associate Chair of POWER, as well as Jalen. I am here in solidarity with Black and Brown at DP. Reading through the testaments on Instagram and online, there were very scary similarities to what they were facing in their educational environment and us in ours. And for that reason, I stand in solidarity with them, and I urge Democracy Builders, as well as Andrew, to hold themselves accountable. We are quickly entering a world where white supremacy will no longer be tolerated. And I believe accountability will be the first step to building that world.
Thank you. Alejandro, you're recognized. Do you have public comment?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Marlboro community. My name's Alejandro. My fiance grew up in Marlboro, and her parents are longtime members of the community. I've had the pleasure of getting to meet some of you, but not all of you. First, to the members of the community, I want to start by saying I'm very sorry for the disruption this fantastic town has had to endure due to the financial collapse of Marlboro College. I'm a Latinx child of Mexican descent from Texas, and when my fiance told me about the direct democracy that thrives in Marlboro that we're seeing here in this Zoom call and throughout Vermont, I was floored. How amazing. I've never seen anything like this. The dominant voices I heard growing up were more concerned with reducing taxes, privatizing everything, including education, and letting the free market somehow fix all societal problems. I'm sorry that Marlboro was now allowed to use their strong democratic tradition to decide on the fate of the college, a decision which clearly affects everyone in town and forms an integral part of the community. It just seems like as long as this integral part of the community remains in private hands and not in the community's hands, Marlboro will be subject to the ventures and experiments of a small group of decision makers. I also want to say that I stand in solidarity with Black and Brown at DP, and I'm horrified by the experiences I have heard coming from former staff and alumni who were at Democracy Prep. This is a quote from Zenzil Keith, a former superintendent at Democracy Prep, that she gave at the last select board meeting. Quote, I'm a former staff member at Democracy Prep, and I witnessed a number of racist and white supremacist acts, not only committed against students, but against myself as an African-American woman who worked on the superintendent level. I find it very disheartening that a person like Seth can purchase a university that is supposed to train people to work with other students or to train students, period, to work anywhere in any field to educate them when he has absolute disrespect for Black and Brown people. These are things that I actually witness myself. The age that we're in, the way that you show that Black lives matter, the way that you show that Brown lives matter, is that you don't allow somebody like this to come into your community and to spread the type of hate and disdain for Black and Brown bodies like he's done in Harlem. At the same staff meeting, a staff member at Democracy Prep stated that they've collected over 350 stories from staff, families, and kids that have felt compelled to share stories that they describe as, quote, atrocities. I don't think anybody wants to hear this, but I have no reason to not believe these whistleblowers. This is deeply troubling, and I look forward to seeing what plans Degrees of Freedom has to ensure that this will not happen to future students will the organization work with the Black and Brown Collective to repair past harms? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I'd recognize Tina Olson. Tina, do you have public comment?
Yeah, I'm kind of speechless, but I worked for 20 years in the locked wards of a psychiatric hospital in Staten Island, and I witnessed daily the trauma of abuse. And I know also personally, abusers don't change. They don't change so fast. They don't, when they say they're sorry, they don't change so fast. And so I've also lived in Marlboro for 10 years. My daughter's children went to Marlboro School, and the struggle for respect and bullying and ridicule against that is something that nobody can learn anything from at all if that exists. And so I was just, it's kind of recent I learned about this, but I have to say I'm completely appalled at the idea or the prospect of this happening. This person who's, I can't say I never do this, but to say the person sounds somewhat like a psychopath is what I do have to say. And so I'm appalled, that's all.
Thank you. I would like to remind everyone that per our rules of procedure that no personal or profane or threatening remarks shall be made. Thank you. Amy Tudor, you're recognized.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks. I have a procedural question. In addition to my own comment, I have someone else's statement. Is that something I could read for them, or how would you like to handle that?
Well, we just ask that comments are kept to a 3-minute maximum. But
okay, I
feel
don't
free to
talk
share.
long, so I think I can fit them both. Thank you for holding this today. It's really wonderful to see so many people here. It's wonderful to see so many different looking people than we typically do in Marlboro, and I wish this were more standard. I've had a very difficult, I haven't enjoyed my interactions with Seth Andrew. I'm very dismayed that he's going to be here taking care of people. If he ever wants to have a safe place to ask and bounce ideas off as to if what he's doing is harmful or not, I'm happy to be that person. The public statement I have that's a prepared statement is from Kate Hollander, and she couldn't be here today, but so I'll go ahead and read that. Let me read it on the computer. She says, I'm Kate Hollander, a 2002 graduate of Marlboro College. I hold an MA in creative writing and PhD in history, both from Boston University. I have taught both creative writing and history at a wide range of colleges and to a diverse body of students. I definitely understand the desire to start a new college. I understand the magic of Vermont and the campus on Potash Hill. Put those two things together and I can imagine why you would want to be there, doing what you're doing, dreaming up what you're dreaming up. But I have some questions and concerns about this new college proposed for Potash Hill. I'm concerned that Seth Andrew does not hold a doctorate, and I want to know if he has ever taught at the college level. I want to know if any of the founding staff hold terminal degrees, have ever taught college or worked at or run a college. I want to know if they understand issues of accreditation, the ADA as it pertains to college level instruction, and FERPA. I hear that all classes will be taught by adjuncts. I want to know whether Seth Andrew understands the exploitation inherent in that strategy and the problematic and unethical position it places both students and faculty in. I want to know what Seth Andrew and his team would do if their adjunct faculty tried to unionize. I'm concerned that this college is being pitched as innovative, yet I haven't seen any argument that it's necessary. Students are served in every state, including Vermont, by a community college system, a public university system, and many large and small private colleges and universities. I don't understand why a student would choose to earn an associate's degree at this new college and then have to transfer someone else to finish with a BA. Seth Andrew went to Brown and Harvard. I want to know whether he thinks this college is going to deliver an education comparable to that which is available to students at those schools or other excellent schools of all orientations and missions, including the former tenant of Potash Hill, Marlboro College. I want to know whether Seth Andrew would have chosen an education like the one he's proposing to deliver instead of going to Harvard. If not, then I want to understand who he thinks who is going to choose this education and why it's worth steering them here instead of to a community college or other already existing institution with a public mission. I want to be assured that this is not simply further segregation, a college that from the outset is designed for poor or Black and brown students out of some misguided understanding that this is the best they can get. I want to understand why, if the mission of Democracy Prep and Seth Andrews' other schools is to ready students for college, some of them are going to want to go to his online low-res associate's degree granting school instead of any other college in the United States. Does Seth Andrew think they are not capable of getting in or succeeding somewhere else? I stand with the members of the Black and Brown at DP Collective. I hear what they are saying and I want to amplify it. What I hear is that Seth Andrews' other educational projects have resulted in trauma instead of learning. I read that there are disciplinary techniques that are so psychologically and physically harmful that many of us might have imagined they were phased out of schools decades ago. I hear that these are justified by the suggestion that somehow they are corrective and salubrious for Black and brown students. There is no way around the fact that this is a racist opposition. I want to know whether such racist thinking is also inherent in the design of this new school. And lastly, in my experience, Marlboro College was a place of profound freedom and responsibility. We were responsible for our own education and conduct. There were no administrators doling out discipline or punishment. We were self-governing. We engaged in deep self-directed study. Learning happened in a spirit of curiosity, seriousness, and joy. We were understood as equals in running the school, and a real, if imperfect, egalitarianism and democratic spirit suffused the place. I want to know if Seth Andrew has ever been part of an educational community like that, whether he would know what to do with one if he stumbled on it, and whether he knows how to be that kind of neighbor to the town of Marlboro.
Thank you. Recognize I support Degrees of Freedom, or DOF. Do you have public comment? And you're muted.
I'm unmuted now. I am a biracial immigrant who has personally seen the hardworking team of Degrees of Freedom working on an anti-racist platform. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of well-meaning people who don't know that much about what we've been doing, what we've been working on, are trying to do the right thing. I understand that there is tremendous passion, and that is wonderful in this moment to try and bring about change. I think that Degrees of Freedom stands for that positive change, and I hope that all of you will keep an open mind.
Thank you. Kate Judd, you're recognized. You have public comment.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So I'm Cantor Kate Judd, and I'm the spiritual leader of the Jewish community in Brattleboro, Vermont. But before that, I am the child of someone who taught at Marlboro College forever and the grandchild of the founding trustees of Marlboro College. And so I have feelings about what happens up there on the hill. And I just want to say briefly that my concerns are twofold. I'm concerned about all the allegations, really horrible allegations of racism, and why are we not looking at that? And I'm also concerned about the possibility that Seth Andrews and his operation are financially unreliable, to say the least. The whole thing has an aura of flim-flam around it that really concerns me. And if there's any way to put the brakes on this thing, I hope that that will happen. That's all I got.
Thank you. And please mute if you're not speaking. Ernie Symes, you're recognized. Do you have public comment? A thumbs up or down will be fine. There you go. We'll move on. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm listening and learning. No comment at this
Thank
time.
you. Michael's iPhone, you're recognized. Michael, do you have public comment? And you're muted. Thumbs up or down.
Can you hear me now?
I got you.
Sorry about that. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm in my 60s now, and my wife and I have had 4 children go through the democracy process, middle school and high school. I feel it fair to say now, since I think I'm the second parent after all these testimonies since 5 o'clock that has spoken out in support of Mr. Andrew. Quick background. I grew up in the South Bronx. I live in Harlem now. In my lifetime, I've experienced all types of racism against myself and others. I've experienced physical assault in the South. I went to college up in Boston. I've experienced physical violence in Boston. I've been a member of I was a member of the New York City Police Department as a superior officer for many years. I was also affiliated with the FBI. I think I know racism when I see it, sir. I've experienced it enough myself, and it's very insulting. I know that the scale is kind of unbalanced here, with many speaking out in favor of Black and brown and financial issues, etc. And I support Black and brown to the extent that I support their right to speak out for wrongs that they feel they've experienced. But this was not my experience. I would never, it's insulting to presume that my wife and I, having experienced what we did in our lives, would send our children anywhere near the racist and the supremacist that Mr. Andrew is being alleged to be. As far as his school system, yes. Early on, there was a woman that said that she couldn't believe a child could get detention for having their shirt untucked. Yes, and girls got detention for wearing extravagant and gaudy jewelry because there's a dress code and a behavioral code. This detention wasn't in a dark room and with being strapped and paddled. No, they did their studies, they read, etc. And it was a half an hour to 45-minute detention to enforce the rules. More importantly, before I expire my time limit, I can't thank Seth Andrew enough for instilling in my 4 children, the oldest of which attended Annapolis and is a naval officer. Next, I have a young man finishing up school in a very prestigious school in the South. I also have a young man going to boarding school. And my youngest just graduated in June, and she's on her way to the Ivy League. This is not magical. This is no magical formula that my wife and I had. This is believing in Seth Andrew and Democracy Prep and its teachers. Now I ask you, how come there aren't more parents of these students? And where are these students that felt so oppressed when I went to parents' meetings and when I went to parties with my children? This is all new to me. I did hear they give us too much homework. Why are they so mean? Why can't I do what I want to do? I heard complaints like that, but I hear complaints like that from all teenagers. There's not the type of abuse that the folks in Marlboro are hearing about. I live 4 blocks away from the school. Trust me, if I felt one of my children, especially my little girl, was being abused in any way, I personally would have torn Seth Andrews' head off. But he has been nothing but supportive in all the years that we've known him. So please try to listen to other points of views as opposed to the now largely anonymous group of kids, students, young people now that have graduated. And let's see Democracy Prep if we can get some of the parents like me, who I've seen personally hug Seth Andrew and his teachers and thank them for everything they've done for their children. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Susan Kuhnhardt, you're recognized. Do you have public comment? No. Okay. Nellie, you're recognized. Do you have public comment?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Nelly Sarkisian. I'm a town resident. I just want to start by acknowledging that not only we are on stolen land, but we're also right now in this format using settler colonial way of organizing ourselves, okay? And that we're all complicit in this white supremacist, racist culture in which we live. So just, I think it's important that we all start our questions from that place of acknowledging our own complicity and asking ourselves, how are we divesting from white supremacy and racism in our daily lives, not just on social media? So this is important, and I am, this is difficult for me to say right now because I live in a predominantly white town, and as a person who's not white and who's not identifying as a person of color, I always have anxiety when I comment on systemic issues because that has the tendency to alienate people. But I need to say this. I also want to recognize the insufficiency of this process because it's reverse. We need to hear from people, from the institution, people who represent the institution, to understand what is their pedagogy, what is their curriculum, what are their hiring practices before we can ask questions like this. It's like silenced, and then we articulate these things without actually hearing what they're doing. But what's deeply, deeply troubling to me is just thinking of the institution as a white guy, as Seth Andrews. So this is troubling for me as an educator who's been affiliated with institutions, who too, you know, doesn't matter what I say, the work that I've done for years, Marlboro College was associated for some people who opposed the closing of the campus with Kevin Quigley, a white guy. This is troubling. This is again only recognizing a white person as the institution and erasing the work that leaders of color, faculty of colors, you know, staff members of color have done for years. I think we should address this. This is really troubling, and just keep hearing like Seth Andrews, democracy builders as synonymous. These are not synonymous. Of course, I'm gonna take up Seth Andrews on his call for, you know, just being held accountable. I wanna know how you're gonna be divesting from the systemic you know, racism, from white supremacy, how you're gonna use your authority to support the vision of the design team, which in my understanding is mostly leaders, staff, and faculty of color. And I want to hear from the design team, these people who are imagining an you know, education. I want to understand, well, you know, what's their vision is, and I want to know how those in authority are supporting them. And I really want to reiterate what I think Kaya Morris was saying, that supporting, of course, no one's perfect, everyone makes mistakes, and this is not excusing any instances of racism, that's not what I'm talking about. But this banishment, like we don't want this institution in our town, is just an excuse and absolution from doing the actual meaningful work of eradicating, you know, racism and white supremacy. How about we engage in deep, you know, in deep work of, you know, anti-racist education? What would that look like in this very white town? That's
now, and we've exceeded the 3-minute mark. If you could just find a wrap-up point.
Thank you, Jesse. That's sufficient for me.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Lauren Poster.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of the 3 minutes, and I have a lot to say, mostly because I've been listening to all of you and really value and appreciate what I'm hearing, even from those of you that are taking a position in support of freedom to choose freedom, as I'm reading it, that I have serious qualms about. I really value your presence here today and appreciate your coming. I want to start by just thanking Lynn Perna for starting our meeting tonight with remembering John Lewis, who is a personal hero of mine and a gentle man, if ever there was one, who also stood up for what he believed in. As a former Marlboro School school board member, I believe very strongly in public education, and I think that public education is deeply flawed and needs our work and our attention. And I believe that charter schools and the funding that goes to charter schools is diametrically opposed to helping that work happen, especially in poorer neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color. Not that I, living in Marlboro, Vermont, have experienced personally that particular concern. I stand with the students and the staff who call themselves the Black and Brown at DP, because I believe that if there are 350 stories that we are aware of, they need to be heard and taken seriously. That is not to dismiss the families who have had good experiences through these schools. I'm sure that they exist. There needs to be a way for both voices to be heard. And I also just want to say how proud I am to be associated with the few people tonight who have spoken up, who are directly associated with Marlboro Elementary School. Emma Shrifkin, our young alum, and Liz Greco, our amazing teacher, and Lissa Harris, who has bravely stood up as a school board member when the rest of the school board has not stood beside her in raising these concerns. And my own daughter, Ariel Poster, who has worked very, very hard to bring these issues to our attention. And no matter what happens, I feel like the fact that there are so many of us here tonight listening to these conversations and taking account of our own relationships to what's going on in our world right now and how much we contribute to it has to have value, even if I end up disappointed in the outcome. I think we've started a really, really important dialogue in a very white community that has to happen. And very quickly, I'll just say I have tremendous concerns about the finances and the lack of transparency around all of the organizations that Mr. Andrew has associated himself with. Just today, I received an email from Princess Lyle, who is on the Board of Trustees for Democracy Prep, distancing them as a board from Mr. Andrew, saying he has had no association since 2013. However, he continued to draw a salary as a superintendent as late as 2016 or 17, based on public record. That ends around 2016-17. So there is a tremendous question about how this organization is going to support a campus that I live a mile away from, that I feel is part of my community, that is important to me. So there are so many questions here and so many concerns, and I'm sorry if I've gone on too long. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Tish Moya. Tish, do you have public comment?
Yes, I do. Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time. I prepared a statement. My name is Leticia Moya, and I am a former student at Democracy Prep, and I am here in support of Degrees of Freedom. I would like to speak on my positive experience that I had at DP, and that is the ability to think freely, be innovative, be curious, and strive for the kind of future that I wanted for myself as a young Latina woman. Seth Andrews was one of many of the faculty members who challenged, supported, cared very much, and listened to me and gave me the opportunity to exercise my interest. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize iPhone, a yellow t-shirt. Do you have public comment? Thumbs up, down.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
All right. I'm Terrence McNeil. I am part of the community in Harlem, New York. I live right next door to Democracy Prep on 133rd and 7th Avenue. I'm shaking with madness at some of the comments that I've heard. I have indirectly been associated with Democracy Prep for some time. Many of my friends, I went to North Carolina A&T, which is an HBCU, historically Black colleges and universities. Many of my friends have attended Democracy Prep, attended HBCUs, graduated and went back to Democracy Prep because of the opportunity that Seth Andrews has given them, every single person that I've ever met has nothing but great things to say about Seth, myself included. I consider myself an honorary student of Democracy Prep because there's many things that, once I met Seth many years ago, there's many things that he's assisted me with in my business that he had nothing to gain from. He believes in me more than anyone else in the Black community, and it's I'm so sad to say that we're even having this Zoom call on today, because there's nothing racist about Seth Andrews and anything that he's associated with. I'm like Mr. Mike. Mr. Mike said he owes Seth nothing, or Seth has done so much for his students, and he's from the neighborhood. Seth has done so much for my vision because he saw that I'm passionate about students, so he felt the need to pour into me so that I could pour into others. And that's all I've seen Seth do, is pour into the community, pour into his students, pour into his staff members. And it just bothers me. But there's so much that I could say that would take longer than 3 minutes, but there's nothing about that organization. I've seen nothing but greatness come from Democracy Builders, Democracy Prep, and Seth Andrews. And I ask those that are in Vermont to just have faith and trust him, because I see no one else that's more qualified than Seth Andrews to come there and do what he's done to the community in Harlem. And that's just build a great school system that's also believing in those that will attend. Nothing but greatness will come from this opportunity. And I just ask that you guys give him, just believe in him, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to recognize I Support Degrees of Freedom. There's a yellow pine bookshelf behind you. Do you have a public comment? Miss? Thumbs up or thumbs down? I'll move on. Danny with Tenants United, excuse me.
Hi, thank you. My name is Danielle Teen. I'm speaking on behalf of the Tenants Union of Brattleboro, wanting to stand in solidarity with Black and Brown at DP. We would love a statement on how Seth Andrews and Democracy Prep plans to not repeat past mistakes if staff and leadership are all coming from Democracy Prep. Thank you.
Thank you. Grace Roundtree, you're recognized. Do you have public comment? No. I'd like to recognize Tanya. I Support Degrees of Freedom. Tanya, do you have public comment? And you're muted. There you go.
Okay. Yes, my only public comment is that I feel that a lot of the comments have been very unbalanced, and the only thing that we can do is to continue to do the work, which over the past month we have been stopped from doing. And if you just give us a chance as a town and you at least watch, then maybe you will learn and see what we're all about and what we're really trying to do here. Only time will tell. Right now, I feel that yes, answering some questions that need to be answered is an important thing to do. But at the same time, we're taking too much precious time away from, the planning of a great opportunity that benefits Black and Brown people in a way that you guys could never, ever imagine. So just give us a chance.
Thank you. Curtis Archer, you're recognized. Do you have public comment?
Yes. Echoing what Michael, who had the iPhone, said, I actually had a young man who was struggling in middle school. And so I actually reached out to Seth directly. I live in Harlem, by the way. I hold a job with the state of New York. I reached out to Seth directly, and he set up a tour of the school with my son's mother, and we toured it, and we actually were a little bit, how should I say, taken aback because my son was coming from a school that really didn't have structure in place. Now we're going to a school that had structure and expectations that were not simply watered down because this is a Black child from the inner city, but a child who, you know what, if they're giving structure and expectations, you then actually put them on a course to meet those expectations. And that's exactly what happened. And the rest is history. My son is a sophomore now in college, a prestigious college. And my experience with Seth and Democracy Prep was nothing but stellar. So so me tuning into this particular Zoom call, I'm like taken aback, like, who are we talking about? This is not the person that I know. So I'm like still a little bit shaken, but I just wanted to get that out just to say that, and what the woman who just spoke before me said, maybe what the town should do is maybe give a Seth Democracy Prep a chance to show you what they're capable of, to show you exactly what good things can come of this particular opportunity. And now being married to a woman also from Vermont, from Rutland, I know very well that Vermonters are very protective of their town. I get that, but I'm here to tell you, and I will raise my right hand on the Holy Book and just say that from my experience, the person that you're talking about, the experience that you're talking about, is not the person that I know and have come to respect and really look up to. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd recognize Stacy B. Do you have public comment?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Stacy Birdsell. I'm a former teacher from Democracy Prep. I am here in support of Degrees of Freedom, and I just urge this this group of people and especially the select board to make sure as this meeting goes on, and definitely tonight, to make sure that we are hearing all of the voices and being able to represent all of the stories here. I'm really happy to hear and see folks like Curtis and Mike and Tonya and Leticia, who was actually a former student of mine at Democracy Prep. So thank you all so much for being here and for telling your stories. Your voices matter so much, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd recognize Joshua Burns. Do you have public?
Yeah. Sure. Hopefully my internet's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. I've heard a lot tonight, and echoing the dude who was talking before the last lady. We are in Vermont. We do tend to be protective of our towns, and that's honestly how I felt about this whole thing. Marlboro College as an institution, sort of dying off, has been a huge spiritual suck to me. It's brought me down a lot. I graduated from Marlboro College in 2005, and I really haven't known how to move on from it. I was really excited to hear that another institution was interested in setting up on Potash Hill. And then I got really concerned as all of this crap came out about racism and weird financials and everything. This call has been really good for me. Honestly, I've heard from a lot of Black and brown people who are both in solidarity with the people who've spoken out and who are parents and alums of democracy, not democracy builders, but the previous incarnations in New York and elsewhere. I think we need to listen to those voices. I'm more hopeful now than I was. I think that the proposition here is not terrible. I think charter schools are bullshit. And I think we need to be skeptical. But if this is going to be something that could, you know, really take root in our town and be good, then I'm all for it. It would certainly be good to bring more diversity to the area and to hear more voices in our, you know, town meeting. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Mike Cummings, Jr., you're recognized. Do you have public comment?
Yes, I do. Good evening to everybody. So my
I lost you, Mike. Let's move on. Joshua Bird.
Hello.
Oh,
Nobody can hear me?
there you are. I got you.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I'll be quick. So, like I said, my name is Mike Cummings Jr. I am a former student of Democracy Prep. And all I wanted to bring to the table was a little bit of perspective. One of the first people to speak said that they noticed a lot of the commentary that the discipline practices at Democracy Prep, you know, were militaristic or idealistic of the prison system in the United States of America. And as someone who is both currently serving in the United States military and someone who's also been to prison and is well associated with the prison system, I can tell you that those statements are utterly false. There is nothing in comparison to the prison system when you're walking in a line being escorted by guards versus when you're moving in an organized fashion inside school halls in order to get to your next classroom, because there are 300 people, 300 students and faculty member transitioning in one hallway. They're just not able to be equated properly. In addition, I think that it is unfair to point to Democracy Prep as an institution or any individuals associated with Democracy Prep as racist, especially in the current times that we're in, when we see the embodiment of racism with things like police brutality and people not being held accountable for their actions versus when they're conducted against people of color and people not of color. I don't think that that word racism should be used to describe a school that sent both myself to the United States Naval Academy and my siblings to other prestigious institutions. It just doesn't, the two don't equate to me. Additionally, I would like to also state for the record that I watch intently everything that is posted on Black and Brown at DP. And as somebody who was at the school for a very long time, there are statements and there are stories that I see that I identify with because, you know, it was high school and I was a teenager at the time for most of the time. And some of the practices were not, were not my favorite. You know, I was a high school student and I didn't want to stay in school until 5:45 in the afternoon and then do 3 hours of homework. It wasn't my favorite thing. But I also see some statements that I know to be utterly false. Some statements that I see have a lot of hyperbole and are taken out of context. And I want everyone to know that while yes, you know, anybody can make a statement and write it and submit it on a form, which I also did. I submitted multiple statements to Black and Brown at DP, which were never posted online. I think that everybody should just take that with a grain of salt. And also just be aware that just like you see, I think there are like 60 or 70 posts online for Black and Brown at DP, there are hundreds of students that have graduated from the institution since the first graduating class of mine at 2013. And I think if you look and read 66 posts, you should understand that there were 40 people that graduated with me. So if there were another 40 kids each class, which there were way more, I think I was part of the smallest graduating class, then you should see just how small that sample size is in comparison to all the students that Democracy Prep has served and will continue to serve. And I think that Degrees of Freedom is a wonderful opportunity and we should give it a chance. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Recognize Meg Guilford. Meg, do you have public comment? Hey.
Hi, my name is Meg Gulliford. I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania, and I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and express my appreciation for those in the surrounding area around Marlboro for their support for the Black and Brown students at DP. I grew up in central Kansas in a town like smaller actually than Marlboro, Vermont. And I'm glad that their voices are being heard and that you are listening to them. However, I would caution, given the demographics of Marlboro, for those who are not Black or Brown to extrapolate further than those statements. Those statements are those statements are given by Black and Brown students, and so it's important that we hear them and understand them. However, let them stand on their own and allow them to voice their concerns. I think that if you allow degree of freedom the opportunity to actually explain, and which is what the purpose of this meeting is, I think some of your questions will be answered. And of course, there will always be questions that are begged by the commentary, but these open dialogues are very important. And as a Black woman who grew up in rural Kansas, who later went on to be at 2 Ivy League schools, I think it's very important that you understand that there is an opportunity here that we don't want to discount entirely, but there are ways in which we can do it. And I think that Degrees of Freedom is open and willing to hear from the community and incorporate the community into their considerations. But there are people here who have done this before, and I think that just hearing them out and understanding that there are several sides to this, and like we're learning now in the COVID crisis, that there are certain things that administrators do that may not at face value seem understandable, but are for the good of the entire community. And what needs to happen, I think Mr. Cummings just spoke about the idea of transitioning from classroom to classroom. Like, there is a reason for doing that. There is a reason, there are protocols, things have to be done. As someone who spent most of my career working for the Department of Defense and specifically the United States Marine Corps, there is a reason for these things, and you just need to hear people out. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Meg. Farouk Ibrahim, do you have public comment? You're recognized. And you're muted.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And my name is Farouk Ibrahim, as you said, and I'm in support of Degrees of Freedom. Basically, I'm speaking on behalf of Seth Andrews, one as a character representation. My experience with him has been very favorable, and I would say on a business level as well as on a personal level as well. I have not seen or have heard any of the things described so far that I've been listening to in his character, not even Freudian slips, you know. However, I was an attendee on the June 13th, 14th, and 15th meeting in which we were able to have an open discussion about the direction of Degrees of Freedom. And a lot of the members that were there were highly educated people and individuals that were former students, and they were well invested in terms of the direction that they felt that needed to be addressed, which a lot of these subjects or topics were addressed during that time, which was even down to Seth Andrews himself being a representative. And what I saw was a lot of input that really was moving towards a direction of helping urban young people to actually exceed or succeed in life. So I think that it would really go in a bad position if we were not to take in consideration some of the things that they were proposing. They had a very strong vision for the curriculum in which they were going to change the culture of how education was going to be conducted. And I think the input that they were receiving from people who were attending there scholastically, as well as people who grew up in the urban communities, their investment, I think, would pay off in the future, provided that we give it a chance. I think, in addition, that this forum is necessary to bring about the transparency that's needed to be able to have the right discussions that can set the direction. So if we were to treat this as an open-minded communication, then we would be able to maybe drive the perspective or the direction of the perspective in the right way. So, and with taking that in consideration, just give it a chance, put everything on the table, and let it go, let it flow, and that's it.
Thank you very much. So we're at 6:30 right now. We did make a motion to extend open public comment for the hour. So we've reached our time. What I'm going to propose is that we extend public comment, but we actually add it to the back end of the meeting. So the Degrees of Freedom team have been patient. So I'd like to make a motion to extend an additional 40 minutes of public comment after we speak with Seth and team. So do I have a second there?
I second that.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries.
Jesse?
Yes.
Jesse, I was going to ask if I could speak very briefly just to change up the tone of the conversation a little bit.
I think at this point we've passed the motion. We're going to close public comment. I will say that just before we close off public comment now, I would like anyone that has questions that they would like answered. We will make a transcript available after this meeting. We will share it publicly and ask that Seth and the Degrees of Freedom team respond by our next regular select board meeting. So with that said, let's close off public comment, at least prepare any questions that you may have. Feel free to leave them in the chat. And I would like to recognize the Degrees of Freedom team, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you all for recognizing us during this meeting. We are going to well, I guess we'll sort of summarize what we hope to accomplish in this meeting. One is to spend some time really providing clarity and contextualizing the allegations, some of the allegations that have been made towards Democracy Prep, but also contextualize it and really show you all the data and explain, you know, what's happening behind those anecdotes. But also, you know, to hear from our design team and to think about to hear from us in terms of what we plan to accomplish with Degrees of Freedom and how we would, you know, appreciate the support of folks who are really invested in this idea of anti-racism work and invested in the idea of bringing a school that can diversify or enrich the Marlboro community into fruition. And so with that, I will, you know, hand it over to Basil Smikle.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Basil Smikle, and I'm here to talk about my support for Degrees of Freedom. You know, I can vouch for Degrees of Freedom because I recognize the educational challenges and opportunities that I faced in my own life. I am also a child of the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx to immigrant parents from Jamaica. My mother was a school teacher and taught special ed for 30 years in New York City. She also sent me to Catholic school from grades 1 through 12. So that included a lot of what people have talked about, which is both behavioral and academic discipline. I had to have my shirts tucked in. I had to wear a suit and tie for pretty much my entire academic career. I had to wear shoes that could hold a shine and no facial hair whatsoever. Those were the rules. And as much as my parents tried to keep me safe, sadly, when I was 12, I was shot by a 14-year-old right in front of the school. He was a drug dealer in the neighborhood, even at 14, and wanted me to work for him, and I kept refusing. And so he shot me to sort of teach me a lesson about opposing him. That's obviously a very important moment in my life because it was my value for education and for educational opportunity that made me focus more on my studies and make different choices than I perhaps would have if I didn't have that urging. And so it steered me clear of further trouble and helped me make some better choices. And so after these 12 years, I got I had this experience of going to Cornell where I spent 4 years on food stamps so that I could eat. I went to Columbia and got an MPA and a PhD focusing on education policy. And between that and my 25 years in public service, and now teaching at Columbia and the City University of New York and Teachers College, I can say that I've been committed to education for young people who are dealing with very similar trauma and face similar challenges in their lives, and for young people for whom traditional approaches to education haven't been working. I relied on a lot of those lessons to help start the Eagle Academy High School in the Bronx, which is now 6 schools dedicated in New York and New Jersey, dedicated to teaching Black and brown young men. They're single-sex schools. And it was around this time that I met Seth, and I met Seth actually working on a project to organize parents in New York City. I was attracted to his commitment for education, to civics education in particular, and to working with parents to look for the kind of innovation that I think was really needed and was happening in the community already at that time. Yeah, he's been a good ally. We've worked together to find common interest among parents, activists, community leaders, and he's doing the work that I know he's done in other cities in the US and frankly across the country. And it's true, I know that there are some problems that exist. Some of them I've talked about and written about publicly, and some of them have been echoed here. But there is a real need for engagement and activity around solving a lot of these issues, because they don't apply just to the schools that we've been talking about, they actually apply to all schools. Because there are hundreds of children who've been positively affected, thousands of families who've been positively impacted by the work that's being done by the teachers, educators, and activists and parents who are on this call that are our supporters and part of our extended family. And so one thing is clear to me as I close. Black and brown families have been dealing with education equity issues for over 100 years. We have had several iterations of choice, if you will, from magnet schools, independent schools, experimental schools, schools started by parents, by teachers, by community leaders. The Black Panthers had schools. And while degrees of freedom won't solve the entire problem, this is an opportunity for young people who don't have privilege and don't have the financial support to have things like a gap year, to be at an innovative college campus in this great state, to get a sense of what college life is like, and to obtain some instruction, to get support, and to improve their skill sets, to make good decisions about their future, like I was able to do for mine. And to wrap up, Nellie, I think her name is Nellie, I hope her name is Nellie, made a really good point earlier, that there's a lot of work to be done. It's a lot of work being an anti-racist. There's a lot of work engaged in that kind of instruction, but the truth is, this is an opportunity to create this kind of collaboration where we can talk about anti-racist practices, pedagogy, and engagement. And I look forward to working with everybody to do that. So thank you very much.
Are there other members of the Degrees of Freedom team that like to speak?
Yeah, I would just like to say again that, like I said, I think that this is taking away precious time from planning that could be done. Excuse me, the green screen is kind of like blowing up everything. So it is taking away precious time from the planning of the planning process, which is really important. I also want to just say that my start with this organization goes back 10 years at this point, where I started as a canvasser and kind of just kept, even after I no longer canvassed, I kept on volunteering my time and have just stood up with Democracy Builders, which is the actual organization that Mr. Andrew is a part of at the moment. And I have stood up with them in many different situations, whether it be advocating for choice and voice for Black and Brown students, to have better educational opportunities or more educational equity, as has been spoken about, and also just whatever, whether it has been about supporting the right political candidate or what have you. So I have been around for a while, and I do believe in this latest venture and all of the lives that it can change. And again, I just ask that you all give us a chance to show you what we're made of and to show you what we can do. And I promise you won't be disappointed. I know you can't please everyone all the time, but I can guarantee you that we can please a great number of you given the chance. And right now, I feel that we've been kind of shut down before we've even had the opportunity to show what we're made of. So that is my comment.
Thank you. I do have a question. I am curious if the Degrees of Freedom team has a board of directors. And has that been made public?
Yes, we do. And maybe Shandell might want to answer this.
Sure. So we look to expand the Degrees of Freedom Board of Trustees. However, to, I think, speak to the nature of this endeavor, to reflect things like, experience in the higher education space, and to ensure that we have a team of folks who are prepared to govern over a college. At present, the Democracy Builders team consists of 5 members, all of which are a range of, actually all of which are people of color, and constitute a range of professional experiences suited to the work that Democracy Builders had been engaged in prior to the sale of the school.
Thanks. So as a nonprofit, you have a 5-person design team, but do not have a board of directors?
Go ahead, Giselle. She's actually a member of the team. She can can tell you.
So hi, my name is Giselle Smith. I go by Jay. I am currently a board member for Democracy Builders. I am a I'm an alumni of Democracy Prep. So our board consists of me, a former parent, a former teacher from Democracy Prep, and we are mostly people of color. So yes, Democracy Builders does have a board, and we are mostly Black and Brown.
Would you share their names publicly, or?
So it's me, there's Marcelina Cummings, there's Stacy Birdsell, there was Princess Lyles, but she had stepped down. And there's another.
Was there public reasoning for why she stepped down?
So that I could join the board. We thought that the Black and Brown page had came out with a statement saying that alumni should be on the board of these organizations. And that was one thing that Democracy Builders board heard and listened to. And so they had reached out to some people, and I agreed to join on the board.
Mm-hmm. So was there a limit? The board was at capacity, and unless a trustee stepped down, they wouldn't have been able to have appointed you, Jay? Yes. Is that accurate?
I believe so, yes. Well, I guess Seth can answer that.
Seth, would you like to chime in here?
Not really, but the board bylaws can be changed, but Princess also has multiple hats and decided that she needed to work with the Democracy Prep side of the house while they were under attack from this exact conversation.
So do you technically have a board of directors that could be in communication with?
Yes, of course. Yes, yes, of course.
And will you make that information public?
Giselle just did. Marcy, Stacy, Seth, Giselle, myself, and myself.
And is there any formal connection between the business entities of Democracy Prep and Democracy Builders?
No,
There's not.
there is not.
On the Democracy Builders website, you list Democracy Prep as a featured project. Could you see how that might be a bit misleading?
No, that is not misleading. That is 100% accurate. Democracy Builders is a social sector incubator that builds and launches new projects, including Democracy Prep. We're very proud of it.
Could you clarify though, so the relationship, if there's no formal business relationship between these two entities, how might, just in terms of optics, I could see how that might be a bit misleading or conflating the two.
It is not misleading or conflating anything, Jesse. We founded Democracy Prep.
Democracy Build, okay, but even though you said there's no formal relationship between the two.
Correct, we founded the entities that we launched.
I'm curious.
What? Giselle, why don't you jump back in for the presentation before we get too far off track with just these questions?
I was on mute. Yes, I would like to start off by saying that we hear the members.
This Seth guy sucks. This Seth guy sucks.
Excuse me. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
As I was saying, I'd like to open up my statement by saying anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies, and practices and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. And so I know a lot of people are concerned with the statements that are made from the Black and Brown IDP page. And I would just like to say that I do not wish to invalidate the stories of those who chose to speak out against injustices that they may have experienced. Their stories are valid and they're true, and we are happy that they're using their voices to speak out against it. I feel compelled to speak out because I know that the overwhelming majority of people did not have this experience at Democracy Prep. And a lot of people see Democracy Prep as a space to grow and learn from. And so, yes, we do see these stories and we are taking them seriously, and we are working on ways to make sure that these things don't happen here at Degrees of Freedom. I have been looking into ways to build in curriculum and other things to make sure that these stories and these instances do not happen again. And what brought me to the Degrees of Freedom team is the fact that I have experienced racism and sexism at my previous institutions. I know earlier someone was asking, why is this for low income or poorer people, or are we not good enough for the higher institutions? I applied to over 20 colleges and I got accepted into over 20 colleges, but I just could not afford to go to 20 colleges. I couldn't afford to go to the college of my choice. I had a $20,000 gap. And yes, I got in, and yes, I had tuition and grants and scholarships, but my financials just did not meet. And I had schools that did offer me full tuition scholarships. And I went to an institution, and that institution was horrible, and that institution failed me. And so when Seth reached out and he said that he's trying to build an institution based off of things that people like me experience, and it's not only just my experience, it's the experiences of others that he's heard over the years from students who have graduated Democracy Prep, that he wants to ensure that doesn't happen here at Degrees of Freedom. So no, this is not the lesser of the option, and no, this is not just a place for the poorer people to go or something for segregation. No, this is some place where students like me don't have to be one of 5 students in a class, and we're of all men, and be discriminated against because I'm a Black female. And things like that we're trying to work on, make sure don't happen here at Degrees of Freedom. And although I do understand that my experiences at Democracy Prep were all positive, I understand that some people did not experience those things, and we do not wish to silence those voices. I particularly am adamant about not silencing those voices. I would like to work with them, and their team would like to work with them and open up a conversation about how to move forward and about how to do better. I think a cancel train would not help us and would not help Seth learn from his mistakes and learn how to be better and continue in building educational models, especially as we work here in Marlboro and for Degrees of Freedom. That is all.
Thank you. So let's get specific a little bit. I'm curious if, as a board, if you've adopted any sort of a student or faculty handbook to be able to detail how you might deal with certain complaints from staff or student bodies.
Yeah, that's an excellent question that I hope to answer in my spiel, but I do want to sort of yield the floor to a couple other members of the design team, and then we'll certainly get to that question. I think Marcy was next. It's hard to find people in the sea of.
Is there a student or faculty handbook that could be made available?
Not at the moment.
Do you plan to open this September?
No, so I would love to, like, I want to get into all that in like the proper order if you just allow
Sure.
us to kind of follow our planned presentation. So I'm not sure if Marcy is having connectivity issues. She's another member of the board, but I will.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi guys, I'm Marcy Cummings. I'm a member of the board and also a parent of graduates and a student who went from Democracy Prep and he's high school and boarding school. My husband, my son have spoken already and they've said much of what I was going to say. Giselle just said some of the things that I was going to say, and some of the other students. I personally know some of the members that have spoken on the Brown and Black, and I asked my son when he first told me about the site, the website. I asked my son, did he know any of them, and did he know any of the things that were going on? Because like Mike Sr. said, we had not as a family experienced any of that. My children started at Christian schools, then one went to an independent school, one went to a talented and gifted school. And when we found that the school was not doing what we needed them to do for them, which was educate them, we moved them. I heard someone speak of the charter schools that are in New York. They mentioned KIPP, they mentioned Democracy Prep, they mentioned Success Academy, all started by people who were not of color, but they didn't mention the Harlem Children's Zone, which was started by a person of color, some of my children attended that school. And no in Harlem Children's Zone, and then coming to Democracy Prep, we left the Harlem Children's Zone because they weren't doing what we needed educationally. They had the same uniform rules. They had the same, at Democracy Prep, it wasn't so much as detention for your shirt not being tucked, it was a demerit. And if you got enough demerits, then you would get detention. So for them to just mention the schools that were run by non-Black and brown people and not mention a school that was run by Black and brown persons was surprising to me, because it's such a large entity in Harlem, and not comparing them was surprising to me. My children have, as my husband said, have done a lot in Democracy Prep. I guess I can take a little bit of credit, and my husband also, for building that foundation for them. But when we found that a school was not doing what we needed to do for them, we changed their school. We researched, we looked at neighborhoods, we looked at everything. But when it was time to move my oldest son, Michael, from the school he was at, which was an independent school, I stumbled upon Democracy Prep, and I'm so glad that I did. I'm not saying that any of these things that they're saying on the Black and Brown site did not happen. I'm just saying that we did not experience it, have had no clue. That's why I said to my son, hey, Mike, did you know anything about any of this? And he was surprised at a lot of it also. As far as the teachers, the support, everything at the school, I mean, I can't sing its praises, and that's why I stayed involved with the school. My daughter just graduated this past June. And that's why I would stay a part of it and become a board member, because I saw what the school was doing, had done for my children, had done for lots of other children in the community. When it was a safe haven, as most schools are. It was a safe haven that the children went to, stayed to till late at night. As far as Seth and the comments that I've heard about him, I was floored. It was unbelievable. I no inkling, and as my husband Mike said, we've seen it. I'm a former police officer myself, and I know what it looks like when it's directed at me. I know what it looks like when it's directed at my children, and I know what it looks like when I see it. How other people identify racism or directed at them, I can't speak on. And as one of the people, I can see her online now. I've spoken to her while she was at the school. I've spoken to her when she left the school, and I had no idea that she was feeling and or going through any of what has been stated on the site. I can't apologize for what I didn't know, but what I can say is, and you can't, and I'm not going to say I wish someone would have came to me and told me, because as someone stated earlier, sometimes people don't feel empowered enough to speak. What I will say is that we are looking at what has been said. We're going over what has been said. We're asking others. We're asking ourselves, what could we have done different? What did we miss? And we're trying to make the best. Now, Degrees of Freedom is not a charter school. And Degrees of Freedom is also for adults, college age. And so it's a little different in an experience of a child. They might not, we're not going to punish someone who doesn't have a pencil, but if you don't come to school prepared, you might get a demerit if you don't ask someone else before it's time for you to write something down and you're not prepared to do the work at school. So I am supporting Degrees of Freedom. Obviously, that's why I'm a board member, and that's why I've been involved since 2008 with Democracy Prep. I've also stayed in touch with the other school, with the other charter school that I was involved with, and it's still involved in the community. And I just hope that, like Tonya said, Giselle said, Shanda, everyone said, just give us a chance, because we're not here to take over. We're here to bring education, continue the education that can happen on this campus. That's what we would like to do. We're here to come into this community and help the community enrich the students that come here, that we hope to come here, and enrich the community itself. I came up just yesterday because I said I was here for retreat. And everything at a retreat, everything is going to look lovely. I want to see what it's like when nobody's around. I want to see what the town is like when they don't expect people to come. Because one of my sons is thinking about coming here. So I need to know more. I need to know what the town is like. I need to know how he's been treated. He was at an independent school. He went to Vanderbilt University. It's not like he does not know how to function in a world that have people that don't look just like him. So he would be comfortable in any environment, but I need to know that he's comfortable in an environment, especially since all the Black and brown stuff has come out, and it seems like a lot of people listening to that part and saying, well, we don't want you here because we hear that this is what you're all about. That's not what we're all about. That's not what I know of Seth. That's not what my family has experienced. That's not what anyone else that I've talked to has experienced. But I'm not saying that nothing has happened, because and no perfect, as has been said before. I thank you for allowing us to talk to you. I thank you for allowing us to listen to what you guys are saying and what everyone is saying, because everyone should be heard. And we are, I know I am, going to do my darndest to make sure that everyone's comfortable, the town, the school, the students, the staff, because, you know, this world is ever changing, and the things that are going on right now have heightened everyone's alertness to racism. But I haven't experienced that, and I'm gonna do my darndest to make sure no one experiences it here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, so I'll jump here now. This is Seth. I am, apologize if I'm losing my cool. I've not been called a sociopath in my life. So this is a new tradition that I'm having to get used to in Marlboro. I will tell you that
that behavior was not permissible, but I would not want to qualify it as the traditions of the entire town. So we won't paint in broad generalizations here, but I apologize for that.
There are a lot of broad generalizations being painted, Jesse.
Go ahead,
I'll
Seth.
give you a little context for me and for the select board and for the members of the community, as well as the dozens of people who've logged on and some of whom had to log off because they didn't know it was going to be open mic for an hour and a half before the presentation. And I want to thank those who have been able to stay on to listen and be part of this conversation. I have devoted my life to expanding educational opportunities for traditionally disenfranchised communities. I have worked on projects and built schools in Harlem, in India, in Liberia, in Korea. And in each context, we've built schools. The model for education has been adjusted for the local context for each individual community while preserving certain core values. And those are the core values that we plan to bring to the Degrees of Freedom program. But obviously there is contextual difference between each of those places in Marlboro. This is in fact the first white community where we've ever built a school. And the pushback that we're receiving is new and unique. And it is pleasant and unexpected, because after having 2 meetings with the elected school board, 1 meeting with the select board, as well as offering to speak with the local press outlets and everyone else, we're still being told that we haven't engaged enough. And so part of the distinction, I will say, Jesse, for you and the select board, and Aaron in particular, is this is direct democracy is brand new to us. That is not how we have ever operated in any environment we've ever functioned. And so the idea that a town would have every single member have public comment is a totally new concept for us. And we have to figure out how to adjust that and our approach to that. But we're happy to continue, as I've told you, Jesse, to have open meetings after the closing and the sale of the campus and talk about ways that we want to continue to work with the community, because I think there are many ways we'd like to do that. This has not been a particularly welcoming process. Members of our staff who've been on the campus have not been treated with the level of respect and dignity that they deserve on campus here in Marlboro. And I am not defensive of myself in this conversation at all. I'm fair game, I'm a public figure. I'm extremely defensive, however, of my family and my staff who have taken the front of this, and it has been unpleasant and unreasonable. So let's talk for a second about Democracy Prep, because you asked a question about the relationship. We have no relationship with Democracy Prep. There are obviously and proudly a number of people who have taught at, worked at, attended Democracy Prep who are part of the Degrees of Freedom program, as well as vice versa. So there's lots of people who work with Democracy Builders, like Princess Lyles, who's now working at Democracy Prep. That's something we're wildly proud of, because 10,000 students have been served by Democracy Prep, over 100,000 families, 100,000 families have asked for the exact kind of education that is being pilloried here. This is primarily and almost exclusively Black and brown families who have asked for this kind of education for their child. Now, the kind of education in 2006 and the kind of education in 2020 has evolved and changed pretty dramatically. And so it is important to understand that that change is part of a feature, not a bug. And let me say up front, I am not Degrees of Freedom and I am not Democracy Builders. I think Nellie was really articulate, and I really want to appreciate her for her comments, because somehow I've become the avatar for this project. And while, yes, I'm the person who is the trying to bring a lot of it together, the team is doing the hard work, and the team that includes our board and includes our staff have just been, going out full steam ahead to try to get open in September. And they've been sort of doing incredibly hard work, of which I'm wildly proud. During this past few months, as you all know, there's been a racial reckoning in America. That's part of why I wrote a Medium post to address specifically the students and faculty who felt like they had been harmed in any way. And this was really early in this process. And that Medium post is still available. I'll happily share it with anybody who asks for it. The reason that I'm so passionate about both those words and that statement is that I feel like it was very clear about the accountability I was taking, the atonement I was making for things that I think were not the right thing in 2020, but that were a different time in 2006. And that for anybody who wants to sit down and talk about them, I welcome that. So for the people that have stepped forward with their names, and now that is Shakira and Miss Lachey and Miss Keith, I would be more than happy to sit down anytime, any place to talk with them about their specific concerns and what we can do to go forward and their specific desires. That is something that I've always said and will continue to be willing to do. It's the difference between having a conversation and sort of being, not actually having a dialogue and a back and forth. So just to close out my sense before passing it over to Meg of what my role at Democracy Builders and Degrees of Freedom will be. Right now, I'm on the board of Democracy Builders. Once Degrees of Freedom opens, I anticipate we will have a new president and leadership. I do not expect to be that president or the leader of this campus. I expect to find amazing talent, and if anyone on this call, for both our colleagues and friends have recommendations, we would love you to send them in to us. We've already spoken, I think Karen has talked to more than 200 Vermont residents who are interested in jobs and roles at Degrees of Freedom if and when we open. So I'm looking forward to continuing that dialogue and try to make this a better relationship than it started out at, both with the elected select board and the elected school board, but also with the town as a whole. And the last thing I want to say about the design process for Degrees of Freedom before telling you a little bit about some of the things we're trying to work on is that in 2005, when we built our first school and we were enrolling students who were 10 or 11 years old, it was not a time where you could work with them to build the school, because they were 10 and 11 and weren't ready yet to add the structures and systems for building a school. Today, in 2020, that's very different. What that means today is that we have a design team. We've had a number of focus groups of students, both from Democracy Prep and other schools, who've been part of the design for this project. And we're really excited for building a new kind of higher education institution that is a totally bold and new opportunity for Marlboro. And the reason this is important, leading into my friend and colleague Meg on higher education, is that Marlboro has a tradition of higher education in this small rural community, which started with Walter Hendricks and Robert Frost. Walter Hendricks was run out of town. Robert Frost and Marlboro College started using public funds from the GI Bill to educate returning soldiers, all white men from the World War II. And what we're trying to do with Degrees of Freedom is build a new institution, an anti-racist institution, one that has learned from the mistakes that we've made, one that has a staff and leadership primarily of color, one that has a student body primarily of color, and one that is designed from the very beginning with the voices who want to speak up about how to build this institution to be better. So if you are or want to be part of that design process and discuss it with us, we would be more than happy to take you up on that offer and engage in a productive conversation, as long as it is sort of not cynical in nature or accusatory in nature, but is actually productive. And one of the things that I'll do now is just turn it over to my colleague Meg, who is a scholar in this specific field. There's been a number of things that have hurt my team, because when people question our credentials, what they're really doing is saying they don't believe that these people could be able to run an institution. And that's just brutal for someone who has dedicated her career on our team, and specifically Meg, to working on these specific issues in higher education and trying to fix them. So Meg, let me turn it over to you for a second.
Thank you very much, Seth. As Seth mentioned, my name is Meg Gulliford. I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. As I stated earlier, I am from a community very similar to Marlboro, Massachusetts. That was in central Kansas, and from there I went to the University of Pennsylvania. So the idea of transitioning from one community to another that is inherently different is something that I've done several times throughout the course of my life. And so I am trained as a social scientist. So for me, empirical data is really what matters. I want to know what the data has to say. Anecdotes matter, but overall, what is the data showing you? We make policy decisions largely based on empirical data and not anecdotes for a reason. That does not discount those anecdotes, but empirics matter above all in the field in which I operate. So I want to talk to you a little bit about why higher education is broken and the core aspects of degrees of freedom that make it really unique, and the overall implications that matter at the end of an educational experience. So first, as Ms. Morris, I believe her first name is Kaya, please correct me if I am wrong and mispronouncing your name, has so eloquently stated, and I am so sorry, it was Marlboro, Vermont, not Massachusetts, please excuse me, I mean no disrespect on that. So please allow me, please thank you for correcting me, and I mean no disrespect. I apologize there. So the first issues that we have, and Ms. Morris brought it up so eloquently, is that there is an inherent bias that runs through higher education, and at the founding, these things were intentional. This is why you had to have, organizations and schools such as HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, come to the fore, because intentionally Black students had nowhere else to go. They were not accepted. And we've seen some of these issues continue. The biggest problem that higher education has in its broken state is the fact that there is a lack of presence of Black and brown bodies on campuses in meaningful policy decision-making roles. So, and when we see that presence, we see it stovepipe into departments such as African American studies, sociology, and history, and we don't often see diversity across the broad spectrum of disciplines and subfields in which students can be educated. So when you do see a student in computer science and there is a Black faculty member, you see that Black faculty member become overburdened because every student that is of any underrepresented minority will go towards that professor, and that professor takes on an advisory role, even as informal as it can be, for that entire population at times. And so you also have the idea of legacy admissions. Legacy admissions are very much a white American phenomenon. Like, even though we have more Black students going, Black and brown students going to college, even though we have more students from lower socioeconomic classes going to college, you don't see the legacy behind them. And when you do see legacy admission, when you do see legacy attendees, you see it at HBCUs. So I have friends who are generations of Morehouse men, of Spelman women, of Howard University alumni, but you don't see that same thing if mom went to Harvard, did their daughter, that sort of thing is not being seen in the same.
Chat disabled. Chat has been disabled. There is no more discourse. This is bullshit. Chat has been disabled.
Excuse me.
Chat has been disabled. Chat has been disabled. You are some bullshit. Chat has been disabled.
Excuse me, Joshua. Joshua, can I speak with? Please leave. Thank you.
Maybe turn the chat back on. Don't be a dick. Like, come on, just do it.
I wish you understood how a public forum works right now. This is not how we conduct business. Public comment.
Oh no, we silence everybody.
That's
is
not
what we do. Yeah, I'm gone. This is bullshit. Bye.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Fuck the town. Fuck the town. Fuck these people.
Thank you.
Okay, so when we talk about legacy admissions, we know it is empirically a white phenomenon. It is a white American phenomenon. This is not something we see. And as we see that student admissions or student applications are going up, we also see an increase, that same increase in legacy admissions. So that is problematic. There just aren't enough spaces when legacy admissions are at such a high level. And then you also see a lack of presence at senior administrative levels. These are the people who are making policy, who understand. And we see that both in terms of people who came from various socioeconomic strata, as well as racial and ethnic minorities. These are problematic.
what Degrees of Freedom does, you know, people talked about, and I believe several people in support of Degrees of Freedom brought this up, is that it offers students an opportunity that they may not have otherwise received. Unless you grew up poor and a person of color, you can't fully understand the amount of pressure to not only achieve, but also contribute to family, to ensure that everything at home is okay as you go to school. So those pressures are unique to largely students from lower economic strata, who come from lower economic strata, and more so even for Black and Brown students. So that is a problem. But Degrees of Freedom, the design of the school, offers an alternative for those who cannot enroll in traditional residential programs. By no means do, you know, Degrees of Freedom supporters believe that that education is in any way subpar to what anyone else is receiving. It is just a different means. It is a different mechanism to provide education, and it is a mechanism that works for many people given the constraints on their time, their attention, and their lives. So that's really important. There are also these unwritten rules of higher education that many Black and Brown students don't understand because they may be the first generation. And this is something that first generation students feel writ large, but more specifically, those that are Black and Brown see this, and those who are poor. So we know this empirically. There is empirical data that tells us this and proves this. However, what we know on the back end is that jobs are the most important. Getting students into jobs, getting them into jobs that they can, you know, perform and gain benefits and do all those things that we need as a country, because since health insurance is tied to employment, employment is the way to actually achieve. So we know all these things empirically, and yes, we have these anecdotes and they must be attended to. The Black and Brown students of DP, we must attend to those issues and make sure. But what we know more than anything is that, you know, anti-racism, which has now become like on everybody's radar, but I will say this, anti-racism is not something you sit in one training and do. It is something you have to be diligent about every day doing. And it is to ask and expect people to have full up round plans for this at this time is actually just not possible. You know, it's not always possible. Some places will have it, others will not. But to know their intentions is actually what's more important. And we see this because there are very few schools of higher education that have actual plans that have accountability, that acknowledge, that account, and that will provide measures right now. There are very few institutions. Even Harvard doesn't have that available at this time. If you walk to the president of Harvard and said, let me see your anti-racism plan, he would tell you, Larry Bacow would tell you, that's what we're working on currently. We have a committee that's working on that, because they do have a committee that's working on that. People are working towards these ends, but that doesn't mean you stymie progress or you completely stop progress. It just means an additional level of effort needs to go into that work. And I believe that Degrees of Freedom is trying to do that. But with that, I yield my time. And I believe that Chandel has something that she'd like to wrap up with, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sure. I just wanted to say that as a former DP teacher and as a school leader in the South Bronx, I can speak to the immense challenge that it is to ensure that Black and Brown children succeed in a society that has been engineered against them. That challenge is not a fault of our children, it's a fault of the system, but it doesn't make the work any easier. There are a few schools that can say that they have consistently helped students meet their academic goals, and DP is among those school networks. While it is not without flaw, it is certainly not without merit. And we must have a conversation about the impact, because For far too long, the plight of Black people has been ignored, but we have to approach this conversation with nuance and speak about intent. The intent of the network and the intent of myself as a teacher was always to ensure that the brilliance of Black and brown children was honored. And because of that intent and the magnitude of the success in accomplishing that, it's unfair to cast the team aside as a community of people unworthy of engaging in the work. Someone had earlier mentioned that the country is waking up to the plight of the Black community. I personally am not just waking up. I've been more than a bystander in this fight as an educator, a community organizer, a school leader, a philanthropist. We are not a blank slate in this conversation. We have earned the trust of many in our work, and we will work to, win over others through meaningful policies and practices. And so the real question at hand is, how does an organization excited by the racial progress that our country is making galvanize this energy to actually make a difference in our community? We can't just tear everything down. We actually have to build things. And in fact, Degrees of Freedom will be designed to address the pressing issues that disproportionately impact the Black and Latinx community in higher education. We'll take advantage of the blank slate of the college as new owners of the college to create an institution that models what inclusive, rigorous education should look like. We are inspired by the legacy of Marlboro College, and we are forming in sort of to speak to this work of how do you take advantage of that blank slate, is to form a paid 10-month fellowship, which is something that we are doing as a part of our design process. And that's something that we would like to kick off in September, where we're going to be bringing in at least 30 fellows who will be paid for their community expertise and knowledge, right? To support the school design process and ensure that we are creating an inclusive school. There's a reason that we have not completely filled our bench, because then this will be a process of dismantling a structure as opposed to building one that is what it should be. And so I hope I can understand why, the lack of having every single answer of as though we were opening our school building tomorrow is not here, but that is actually by design, because so often people go into Black and brown communities with their own plan of what we're going to do, or what people are going to do, and then people find someone to co-sign on that idea along the way. And so we actually want to collaborate and construct a school that is reflective of the community that we're going to serve with the community. And we believe that piece is important in terms of adding some clarity around what the school design is, and how that speaks to the things that Meg had named about what's wrong with higher education. Some core tenets of the program design are that we want to be able to allow students to come on campus multiple times a year so that they can continue to build a community. Going to school online all year can be extremely isolating for students. And so we want them to have a space where they can come into and still get some pieces of that on-campus experience, even if they are unable to attend a full residency program. To be able to have that piece. And when we think about some of the ways that we want to be inclusive and allow our students to feel seen and heard, we think about cohorts, affinity group cohorts, things like that will allow students with different experiences, whether they are a parent, whether they took 2 years off of school before deciding to pursue their education, or whether they're straight out of high school. Those students all need something different. And we believe that by creating space for our students to connect with one another and to provide supports in those areas, that our students can be effective. And we also think about the degree programs or concentrations that we hope to accomplish with this program. We're specifically thinking about what are the majors, what are the areas where Black and brown people are underrepresented, and where are the areas where we are overrepresented and are more likely to be susceptible to automation. Those are really real challenges. Those are pressing challenges that our team hopes to address. And so again, I think I'll just continue to echo what my colleagues and supporters of DOF have named throughout this process of giving us an opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to this anti-racist work by the fact that we are sort of taking that additional year to make sure that our team really reflects what we need to open successfully in September 2022 with a full cohort. And in the meantime, we will continue to do the work that is necessary to ensure that our school is inclusive, that our education is rigorous and it's relevant for all students and allows them to compete on a global stage.
Thanks, Shondell.
Mm-hmm.
Any other members of the Degrees of Freedom team? I wonder if you'd entertain a few questions from some of our attendees. They've been submitting questions in the chat over the course of this meeting, and I'm just wondering if you'd be open to responding to some of them.
To be quite honest, I feel that the chat has been like a mix of like hostility, sarcasm, like a lot of, it doesn't feel like the appropriate space to apply, to respond to these sorts of questions off the cuff. Like, we are happy to take those questions and submit them as you had suggested at the beginning of the meeting, written in public, but this doesn't feel like the right moment.
Yeah, okay.
I think also a lot of us have children we have to feed and other things we have to do. So I think that this conversation obviously needs to continue, but I don't think it all will be processed in one evening.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a much larger conversation and much bigger implications, what we're seeing on a national scale. And in my view, what we're seeing is really a reckoning with a lot of alumni, students who have come through these no excuses charter networks and are starting to reflect on that experience. And anonymous testimony or not, it's clear that this is an opportunity for you, if you're building a new pilot program, to really listen to those allegations and not belittle or diminish what they say, regardless of whether they're anonymous or not. And in other instances, people are going on record and being quite transparent. I just saw a spokesperson for Success Academy just resigned in protest, saying she couldn't really defend the no excuses charter network anymore. I'm curious if Degrees of Freedom is going to adopt a similar sort of no excuses model and also the demeritus system.
Before anybody says anything, I'd just like to respond to Jesse's comment where you spoke of what you believe to be belittling or demeaning the commentary that Black and Brown students at DP, their posts. I don't actually see that happening. Most people who spoke in support of Degrees of Freedom talked about taking what is learned from that. And so I think that's a mischaracterization actually on your part. And I just wanted to at least raise my, Margaret, could you mute your mic, please? I just think that's a mischaracterization on your part, and that is just my opinion, but I at least wanted to raise it because what I heard here was everyone wanting to honor what was said, but at the same time, making sure that those who understand how to set up and run a school do it with that in mind and not necessarily let that completely lead the way. So I just wanted to raise that as a point of.
Thanks. Yeah, and I also just wanted to sort of echo some of the sentiments that Meg made as well. I think that like what I think members of this team feel compelled to ensure comes across in this meeting is that racism is not the through line for Democracy Prep. I think that it is a large institution. It educated 10,000 students. And can we say with certainty that no one experienced, had any sort of bad experience ever? No, that can't be said. And I don't think that can be said for any school. However, what we felt the need to defend as a community is that the overwhelming impression of the Harlem community is that Democracy Prep is a terrible place, or that it is run by racist teachers or leaders. I am a teacher, was a former teacher. I am not racist. No student would stand on any stage and call me anything close to that. And so it's just too much. When we talk about broad strokes, like those sort of opinions also reflect a broad stroke. And that's why we felt the need to defend the other side of the experience, while we are not invalidating what other people went through. I did not work with, I don't, just because I didn't personally witness it doesn't mean that it never happened. But at the same time, it is important to acknowledge the fact that there are other people who had positive experience, and that part of the story has not been being told. So we felt compelled to tell it.
Just to clarify, the only sort of insight I had were these quotes that were shared in the Commons and Reformers article, where it sort of conflated, an opposition group and, folks who are very dismayed at the sale of the Marlboro College campus as being sort of conflating the allegations and testimonies of the Black and Brown and Democracy Prep group. So I was just going off of quotes that were submitted, and frankly, I think this is, again, just a much larger conversation, and it's an exciting opportunity if you're building a pilot program to really incorporate everything that these groups, regardless of whether they're alumni of Democracy Prep or Success Academy, to really be able to get specific. Let's get concrete here. And I appreciate all the personal testimony, but now it's saying, let's see your student handbook, let's see your employee handbook. And just as you said, Harvard might be working through this. It's Degrees of Freedom's opportunity to do just the same. And so I really want to get very specific. And I think the community it would be interested to see specific details about how you plan to go forward, basically an acknowledgement of these testimonies, and how Degrees of Freedom is going to respond accordingly. And that's why I asked about your board of trustees. Frankly, I think that's their role and responsibility to be able to address it head on.
Well, I think as Shondell pointed out, if we have that list of questions that we can take for the record, that we will provide further insights into, we're more than happy to do this. It's now 7:33, and as someone stated, people have children, people have, things that they need to do. And by no means am I saying that this is the end of the conversation, but I think this is actually a really good place to break. And you provide those questions, that list of questions, and we provide you that feedback back that you requested.
Actually, excuse me, Mr. Chief, just a quick statement, sorry. As a representative from Black and Brown community, I acknowledge that we've had a lot of democracy builders' voices come forward today. I was wondering if I could read a brief statement from that I wrote.
Please.
Okay. So I wrote this in preparation for going before democracy builders.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're getting a little bit of feedback. If anyone who's not speaking could mute, please. Thank you.
Is this better?
Yes.
Just for full transparency, I was expecting for public comments to be before democracy builders spoke. So some of my comments may seem a little off, but I think in a large part, it's still relevant to the conversation that has happened today. So again, I would just like to thank the members of the Marlboro Select Board for allowing me time to speak today. For those who have listened to the last Marlboro Select Board meeting or who attended the last Marlboro Select Board meeting, I went under the pseudonym of Telling Truth as a member of the Black and Brown at DP Collective and as an alumni of the founding class of Democracy Prep, having been there from the first day it started in 2006 until I graduated in 2013. Prior to today, the most we've heard from democracy builders is through reports from the Brattleboro Reformer and Common News, and I was hoping to reflect a little bit on what I've heard today as well as what I read through those articles. So I think there are several key points of pushback that we've gotten prior to today from the democracy builders and towards Black and Brown at DP. The first being that Black and Brown at DP has used false narratives in an effort to cancel Democracy Prep and Seth Andrew. I think I speak for the entire collective of Black and Brown at DP when I say this is not the case. Simply speaking, cancel culture is not effective. Cancel culture is a short-term phenomena and in many ways a fad. The general public, and this is for cancel culture specifically expressed primarily through social media, quote unquote cancel influencers, celebrities, and corporate entities long enough to either A, wait out the next hot topic, which can come anywhere from a few days to a few weeks later, or B, long enough for that public entity or public person to release a new product or project. In contrast, all that Black and Brown at DP has ever asked for is accountability. We, just as a side note, I like to use the term we because Black and Brown at DP is more than the core team working on this. To quote one of Seth's favorite tropes when I was a student there, we are a team and a family. So we are doing this by reconciling with our past and sharing our authentic experiences. As many who support Degrees of Freedom today have noted, there are positives and negatives to everyone's experience at Democracy Prep, and both are valid. It's not a or, it's a and but. And as I mentioned during the last select board meeting, I myself have had positive interactions with Seth Andrew, but on the flip side have had many toxic interactions with Seth Andrew, and my family has had toxic interactions with Seth Andrew. This allows, expressing our authentic experiences allows all of us to look and see the harmful trends that clearly needs to be amended for the future, as some of the Degrees of Freedom team has mentioned. Accountability is never easy work, but it's necessary for all of us to be better in order to improve ourselves and our society. Seth, to date, in my opinion, has not made a genuine effort to atone for his past wrongdoings. Seth's now deleted Medium article, which was misreported by the comments as being before Black and Brown at DP's existence. It was actually after, a week after Black and Brown at DP's first post on Juneteenth, which is the day that Seth cited as his reflection period for his Medium essay. And almost a day or two after, both Seth Andrew and his wife, Lana Zach, discovered our page through our Instagram stories. And we actually have proof of this because anyone who has an Instagram knows you could see who views your stories. Seth's Medium essay in particular led to several questions from me. One, why has it taken 7 years after leaving Democracy Prep for Seth to start reconciling with his role in perpetuating systemically racist structures? Just as a side note, I put all my questions in the chat so that the Democracy Builders team can acknowledge it in future discussions. To me, the timing of Seth's Medium article and his public statements are incredibly convenient because it's clear that from some of the past select boards and some of our public comments earlier that the Marlboro residents were not a fan of Seth even prior to Black and Brown at Democracy Prep's existence. And his Medium article came only when we had a couple hundred followers, which to me comes off as a way to diminish the narrative before it really gets big on social media. And at this point, we have almost 1,200 followers on our Instagram, which is our most followed feed. Two, why did Seth hide all the replies to his piece with the exception of one positive reply, which came from a Democracy Prep debate coach? It comes off incredibly disingenuous and like Seth is trying to create an echo chamber around himself. Three, why did Seth delete his essay but claim that anyone who wants to reach out to him can do so privately? Yes, as we all can acknowledge, Seth probably didn't get the reaction publicly that he was looking for with his essay. And I can understand why he would feel the need to take that down. But if he meant every word as he put in his amended statement, then we all must stand within our truth. Taking down a statement just seems like you're cowering away from the situation. Four, how did Seth select his majority BIPOC board? Seth historically has surrounded himself with former students, staff, family, and community members that support his agenda and whom he has supported greatly in the past. To me, this is one big echo chamber to people who are complicit, whether knowingly or not, in Seth's spin tactics. But this may not be the time or place to discuss the role of Black actors in perpetuating white supremacy. Seth nor any member of his team, despite several of them watching our every post and Instagram story, which again we have proof to, have reached out across the aisle to lean into the criticism, as Seth stated in his Medium article, and see how we can drive him and his team to create a better executed institution. Like I said, accountability is difficult for everyone because no one likes admitting their flaws, but accountability requires long-term actions and genuine intent. And it's not surprising to me, but still a shame to see that Seth has utilized performative allyship when it impacts his brand the most. Another argument has been the validity of anonymous stories. It's important to note that this tactic is not unique to the Black and Brown at DP, as there are several other pages, such as No Excuse Charter School networks like KIP, Uncommon, Success Academy, and Achievement First that utilize this tactic. This tactic is even seen in private middle schools and high schools across the country, institutions of higher education, as well as large media conglomerates such as Essence Magazine. As Lissa Harris stated in her article that was released earlier this week or late last week, outside of the court of public law, the burden of proof often falls on the victims. Is it fair? Absolutely not. But it's a reality the collective has acknowledged from the beginning. We work off self-reported data and have to find ways to keep track of the hundreds of forms and submission DMs that we get. Can we independently confirm every incident? No. But do we believe most, if not all of these things happen? Yes. The posts on our page and unpublished submissions show trends that span years and that are prevalent across the network and across multiple leaderships. I also want to acknowledge that this is still a new collective and we are learning from our mistakes as we go along. For example, one of the most contentious stories on our page involves a young man named Jonathan Hepburn. We accidentally reported him as being a student from 2014 to 2018, which was the submission year actually from the submission below his. Recognizing our error, we tried to reflect and make note of the fact that he actually was a student from 2010 to 2014, which is something that I can confirm, having been a student at the same time that Jonathan Hepburn and his sister was. No, does this mean that Jonathan's stories and other stories are not true? No, but it does mean that human errors happen and it will force us to be more diligent going forward. Just like we've asked Seth to be more accountable in his actions, we as Black and Brown at DP need to be accountable for any mistakes that we've made, especially because the public scrutiny is from the Degrees of Freedom side is weighing solely on us and our narratives. The last pushback I'd like to acknowledge is Democracy Prep success rate. Yes, Democracy Prep has produced excellent students. I'm one of them and has top of the line academics. I don't think anyone will dispute that. But what about the class turnover rates? I'll use my class to help illustrate this. Democracy Prep has started off with approximately 136 sixth graders, which is something that Seth highlighted both in our 2013 graduation and was highlighted in many early press reportings. I did try to validate that by looking through backwebs and I wasn't able to find that, just full discretion. By the time of our 2013 graduation, as Michael Cummings stated in his public statement earlier, we had about 40 to 45 kids remaining, several of which had transferred in at later years, including design team members Jamie McCoy and Alize Smith, who identifies here as Jay Smith, as well as Michael Cummings, who has self-identified as the son of Degrees of Freedom designer and board member Marcy Cummings. Might I also mention that not everyone who sat on our graduation stage had a diploma. I personally witnessed that some students were given diploma cases with nothing in it and they didn't know that they were graduating until the moment they sat back into their chair on graduation day, which can be incredibly embarrassing. This leads to the question, if we started off with 136 sixth graders in 2006, and on graduation day, we have about 40 to 45 students. What happened to the 90 other kids? They either got left back, kicked out, or transferred. You may also ask, why didn't more families pull their students out? I personally can't speak for all families, and as someone in their mid-20s, I personally don't have a family of my own yet, but I can explain why my mother personally kept me in. She said that she knew that Seth was a racist from the beginning or exhibited racist tendencies. But at the end of the day, she wanted me to have the best education possible, even if it meant enduring extreme conditions. As Seth said in, I believe, a Marlboro board meeting in late May, there are a lack of school choices in New York City. So we had the choice, as many people pointed out, to either go to a general public school that may give us mixed results, or to Democracy Prep and endure potential traumas. Again, not saying that everyone endured traumas, but saying that there are definitely students that did, and though they need to be acknowledged, as everyone has stated earlier. This leads us, so either a general, this leads to another conversation as someone who has read a lot of the Marlboro College forums from one Marlboro College alumni who has questioned why students and families have not sued Democracy Prep as of yet. This leads us down to a much larger conversation, and clearly everyone is tired, so I won't go into that. But just going into some of the smaller reasons or simplified reasons. The first being that simply many Democracy Prep students, when they left, wanted to store their traumas away in a place that they wouldn't find. And I was one of those students. I can acknowledge the fun things like the trips and the news articles, but a lot of my Democracy Prep experience, I just didn't want to acknowledge until the conversation and the time came to start Black and Brown at DP. The second thing is a conversation about the legal system, people of color, and the lack of trust that people of color typically have when it comes to getting proper justice through legal means. And finally, especially when it comes to suing an influential entrepreneur and his multi-million-dollar organization, that being Democracy, at the time, that being Democracy Prep. And finally, it's the fact that kids don't normally have the awareness or the agency that we would have as adults to know that we can sue and how to go about filing a lawsuit as teens and preteens. As Adrian pointed out earlier in the chat, I acknowledge that the sale of Marlboro College to Democracy Builders has gone through with the Vermont Attorney General. So as stakeholders who are concerned about this venture now, our job is to keep he and his team accountable going forward. This includes a thorough investigation into both Seth, Democracy Builders, and its financial viability. Per their 990s in 2017, which is I think something that Adrian also pointed to, Democracy Builders had a revenue reported of just under 700,000. Now I'm not a real estate mogul, but I can tell you it probably takes a bit more to purchase a 500-acre campus. Also looking into the financial history of Democracy Prep, the organization in which Seth started, it has reported losses which has spanned the last several years and also can be seen through 990 reports. My concern is, will Degrees of Freedom follow the same path that Democracy Prep did in terms of losing money year over year? Also, finally, we need reporters who are ready and willing to be objective in their reports and fully investigate all aspects. An example where this didn't happen is with Zenzali Keith, who worked under the chief academic officer during her time at Democracy Prep, and I can personally confirm that she worked in the college office as I was there, and I'm sure that Michael and Jay, who are on the call now and were students when I was a senior, can also confirm her working at Democracy Prep. Both the Reformer and the Common News questioned the validity of her tenure at Democracy Prep because she didn't self-report this data on LinkedIn. However, a search of the web archives through, I believe it's archives.org, but don't quote me on the website, including screenshots to Democracy Prep site in 2013 would have shown that her name was there along with the rest of the Dream Team. Again, I know this has been a long discussion, and I acknowledge that Democracy Prep has come forward to try to share their stories. While I don't think that it is enough right now, and I feel like there's still a lot of questions that are unanswered, we are willing, if Democracy Prep is to reach out to us and start that conversation, we're willing to engage, but that has not happened at this point. I would like to conclude by thanking the greater Marlboro community for the support and for working to amplify our voices. You have not gone unnoticed, and we thank you so much. Thank you.
So it's 7:50. We did extend. We made a motion to approve public comment. So that would put us at 8:10 p.m. So we technically have 20 more minutes to entertain public comment. I would ask anyone that feels a real pressing need to share public comment, if you can put your hand up and I can call on you. I would also say if you'd like to submit anything in writing to the select board or to Degrees of Freedom, we can certainly pass that along. Our email address is marlboroselectboard@gmail.com, marlboroselectboard@gmail.com. Pam, I'd also ask if you want to enable the chat again, people can submit questions there and we'll make that transcript available. Okay, so 20 more minutes of public comment, and does anyone feel that pressing need to share a remark? We're hungry and tired, I'm sure.
Jesse, I know you have a ton of screens to look at, but I've had my hand up for a bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I know I'm scrolling through. Well,
Yeah.
Amy, you've already shared remarks, so unfortunately I won't acknowledge anyone that's already spoken. So, but thank you. Let's see. So hands up. Zenzil, Keith, hi.
Hi, I'm Zenzali Keith. I'm here, and one, I just want to acknowledge that there are people here who I worked with, and I stated in previous statements on the last board meeting that I did work on the superintendent level. My boss was the chief academic officer of Democracy Prep, Dr. Simona Jo Tate, and I was the math curriculum specialist for the network. And I was sitting at the table, and I was privy to a number of conversations pertaining to kids who are here in this meeting. I'm not going to disclose all the things that were said, but like I said in previous meetings, I always find it disconcerting when people bring up their trauma and their pain, and and the response to that, the rebuttal is, but we didn't have it that way. It happens to rape victims, right? It happens to other people who experience trauma. That to negate that trauma, I'm gonna tell you about my positive experience. One's positive experience has nothing to do with some of the heinous acts that were committed towards students and towards Black and brown staff there. So I know there are some people on here who have worked with Seth recently. I know when I worked with him during that first graduating class, some of the things that said to me, I would not allow someone to say if we were in the street, because it is disrespectful and it is racist, right? Being told to sit on the floor, having your entire team, which happened to be on the senior executive level, Dr. Tate's team was the team that was comprised fully of people of color. And that team was completely dismantled because people had a problem taking directive from other people of color. And while I did, when our team was dismantled, I was sent over to the high school and I did work with the college office. And if you understood, I managed that spreadsheet, and Shakira O'Kane could speak to this, but this first graduating class, some of y'all are on here, and I know you want to pat yourselves on the back because you did work hard, but the magic that took place to get people to cross the stage, people aren't talking about it. This man right here, and I said this on the last meeting, did not offer Spanish because he said to me directly, this is not third party. I don't offer Spanish because that's the language that they speak on the street. That's street language. That's why we teach Korean. And he said to me, I want to have 100% of the kids to graduate from Democracy Prep. I said, well, Seth, based on your requirements that you have set forth, you have 6 kids that are going to graduate right now. And the people who are on this call right now, you were not part of that 6. And so when you talk about the things that the Black and brown people, who my whole office that was comprised of Black and brown people had to do, right, to get him to lift up the reins so that you can actually have the 40 something, I can't remember, I don't know if Shakira's still on, 47, however many kids it was who was sitting on that stage to graduate. That we had to, it wasn't about the kids, it was about how he looked in the moment. How did he look? And so because it made him look bad that you were going to have 6 or 7 kids being able to graduate, and this was in the early spring, that he allowed me to allow kids to take the Regents exam in Spanish, in French, right? In the language that they naturally spoke, the languages that he did not respect. Now, I'm from Harlem. I lived in Brooklyn. So when you talk about, someone mentioned on here about, we don't want all of Harlem to see that democracy prep is bad and we want to stand up for the other families. Again, and if this was a situation where we were talking about sexual assault, and there were some kids who were saying, this was my experience, would you have the audacity to get on here and say, well, no one ever sexually assaulted me? Who cares? That's not what the conversation is about. This is not, we're not talking about, we're not having a simplistic conversation where a person is all good or bad, but we're talking about situations, right? Which in a school that's in Harlem, in a place where there aren't many options. Like my mother had to take me to school outside of Harlem when I was growing up. And it's still like that, not many options. That's where people like Seth set up camp. Why? Because I've watched some of these parents go and put on their yellow hats and go and advocate for things that they fully don't understand. Advocating for co-locating in schools where it's inappropriate, like when we advocated to co-locate in a building for adult learners, right? Where it was inappropriate for our children to be there. So he has the power to get parents to get out there and to do those things. And the parents don't understand the kind of conversations that happen behind the scenes. What about the conversation when we talk about the graduating students, this class, Michael Cummings, that whole group? And I love, it's nothing against the students. I love the students. When they had the director, after Shakira O'Kane left, get on it and tell teachers about how they needed to adjust their grades so that they look differently on transcripts. Okay, so when we are talking about this academic dishonesty, not on the part of the students, really, not really even on the part of the teachers, but on part of this executive level so that they can say that they did something, they saved these Black and brown kids. I, with moral conscience, could not work with someone like that who has not reflected on the pain that he's caused for more than however many days he's decided to reflect on it, because we've been posting some of the things that we've seen. No one on this call can negate or disparage me by trying to claim that I'm not a superintendent. I never said I was a superintendent democracy prep. I said I worked on the superintendent level. But I know a lot of things that I saw, I know a lot of things that I heard, and I know how a lot of these students made it across that graduating stage, and it all wasn't honest.
Thank you. Okay, we have 20 more minutes. So anyone that feels a pressing need to speak, Sharon, hi.
Hi, I just, I'm sorry about my dog, it is late. Yeah, I've worked in places that I've seen this firsthand in preschools, and there's a systematic problem, and I'm a Marlboro alumna. It is the antithesis of Marlboro, and the intrinsic trust that we have in people is lost in any kind of demeritus system. And I'm sorry, Millie. I think that we have this opportunity that there's so many people here that it sounds as though there needs to be a lot of action and there needs to be a lot of conversation, and clearly it can't happen now. And so I think that we don't need to give, I'm sorry, in my opinion, Seth Andrews has had a lot of chances. He is very privileged and very moneyed. And so really there are people in the Marlboro community and people on this call that can come together, and maybe the chance Seth needs is to make reparations and a place to learn how direct democracy works, where everybody does have a voice and every voice matters. And I am so sorry, I have been in classrooms where I have seen things, and you know, the underprivileged, the underdeserved, the Black and brown communities and the cultural labels, and it is so sad. and people do not speak up and teachers do not speak up because it is too hard. And so I appreciate all the voices and I stand in solidarity with Black and Brown. And I really hope as a Marlboro alumna and, you know, engaged in Southern Vermont since being there and in the work that I'm doing and working on that, that the select board will have some power to not allow Seth Andrew to take Pottage Hill. It's a place of preservation, of safety and trust at a time where democracy was compromised. We have a time to rebuild our democracy. Last thing I want to say is the systems are all broken. The legal systems are all broken. They're all broken. They're all built on colonialism. So we don't need to go to the Ivy League schools. Marlboro Township, Marlboro College, Pottage Hill is direct democracy. Let's use it and build something together. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Does anyone else have a public comment they'd like to share? 5 pages of participants. I support DOF. Lindsay, hi. Is that Lindsay? I only see the first little bit of your name.
Yes, hi.
Hi there. Hi.
Hi, yes. So I am a former educator at Democracy Prep. I was a special education teacher. And I just want to speak on my personal experience. Obviously, Democracy Prep is not perfect, but in my experience working under Natasha Trivers and actually with Chandel Stone, we taught Algebra 2 together. I saw an organization and a community that was really committed to change. Personally, when I joined the organization, it was still very new. And so the special education program was in its advent. And I was able to propose a lot of new and more open and policies for our special education program that were extremely well received. And I felt as though the leadership was extremely supportive of the changes that I thought were really important. And all of our students with IEPs graduated and went on to college. And I think that is a testament to a leadership that recognized that there were issues, but that also was open to hearing feedback, particularly from a teacher. And in a lot of schools, I know that's not the case. And so I just want to speak to the fact that I think Democracy Prep is open to change, is open to feedback. And I believe that similarly, Degrees of Freedom will act in that way and is going to listen to you. That's why we have this forum and be responsive to the needs of the community. And so to just give them a chance. Obviously, if they don't act in the way that they say they will, if they don't listen to you, then that's one thing, but to at least give them the chance and to see it through. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Hands up for any folks that still want to. Aaron, hi.
Hi, Jesse. Ooh, that was a good one. Sorry about that. I wanted to say thank you to you, Jesse, and to the select board for hosting this meeting. I think it was really important to the community. I wanted to speak on behalf of what I feel is a group of us who have not been vocal during this time, but that we are a part of the community which would like to welcome a new entity to the town. And we would like the opportunity to begin a healing process with the closing of Marlboro College. As a offspring of a Marlboro College alum, and my mother was a nurse there for many years. I also attended Marlboro Elementary School, as have my children. I would like to apologize to all of you who are on this call who have either not felt heard or have felt disrespected. I believe on both sides, it has not been a equal hearing or an equal listening. And I want you all to know that some of us have heard you and we're listening, and we feel very deeply that this is important work for all of us. And I hope on behalf of the town that we don't continue to perpetuate these types of, I want to say, it's almost a type of supremacy you know, to jumping to conclusions and not allowing people who are different to speak and people who are new. I listen to Seth, and I see him as a visionary. Maybe he is not the greatest school leader, but he is a visionary person and he works at tremendous speed. And yes, I believe that he has things to atone for, but at the same time, I believe our town does too. So please hear my apology to all of you. And thank you, Jesse and the select board.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, hands up for folks that are still on video. Jay, do you have a comment? Jay Smith?
Hi, yes. I just wanted to quickly say that we did have a retreat back in June. It was between June 12th and 15th, where we had a group of team members come up and we started these conversations about anti-racism and how to be at a college where we're building with instead of for, before the Black and Brown at DP page came out. And I don't want to say that to lower their voices or anything. I just want to point out the fact that in June, when we came up and the former president of Marlboro College came and spoke with us and we got a tour from the outdoor program leader, we were already starting to have these conversations. The Black and Brown DP page and the Concerned Marlboro alumni and everybody, we are grateful. I'm grateful that everyone is taking this thing seriously. But I just wanted to point out the fact that we were already taking this seriously. So these are not new conversations that we were having. We had a section in the retreat where we talked about anti-racism. We had a section in the retreat where we talked about many, many, many things about how to make sure that the courses that we are building are transferable to other institutions should students choose to go on and transfer out. So these are conversations that we were already having. So I am grateful for the board and for the page and for everyone else joining in, and then also bringing in new questions, some things that we were already talking about and some things that we haven't been. So we are not trying to silence anyone's voices. And I know you guys, why haven't we out?
The video here, the audio.
Please mute whoever's speaking. Thank you.
I know the question has been asked, like, why haven't we directly reached out to the page? I can't answer that for everyone. People are looking at the page. I know that I looked at the page, as I said before, because I am learning from the experiences. And as a person who's on the board and as a person who is part of the design team, I think it's important for everyone to know that, yes, these conversations have started before the Black and Brown page launched. And yes, this is very new. And yes, we are working on it. So this is not some blanket statement of us coming to do this now that we've been called out on it. We were already doing the work, but I think it is good that everyone knows and will hold us accountable, because we don't have a problem with being held accountable for making sure that we are doing the anti-racist work. Yes, I just wanted to point that out for what Lindsay said about responding after the page launched. We were doing the work before the page launched, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Anyone else? We have 10 more minutes. If anyone wants to chime in. David, Mr. White, David, hi. And you're muted, sir. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
David White, and I've been a member of the Marlboro, Vermont Music Festival. I was their production and administrative assistant for 50 years. I retired a few years ago, but I was still going up to get their good meals and attend their wonderful concerts. And I'm so sorry that we're not here to do the same this year, but we're very optimistic we'll all be back next year, and look forward to working with you people with open hearts and open minds, giving you all a chance to do your best efforts as you're doing now. So I wish you the best of luck in all of this. Here's my friend Edwin. Do you have anything to say?
No, I'm just listening. Thanks.
Okay. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay. Just curious, a few sort of pragmatic issues. Just the status of the accreditation, if there are any updates there. to the Degrees of Freedom team. And I think I heard a September 22 one.
Sorry, I didn't hear your question. Could you repeat that?
Just curious if you had any updates, status of accreditation, and then I also heard a projected opening, full opening, September 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we are in the process of addressing the accreditation issue until that time, which is part of the reason why we're not opening until September 2022. So we can make sure that we are partnered with a campus. Sorry, my phone keeps going off. Sorry, we are postponing opening until September 2022 to make sure that not only are we partnered with an institution that, you know, I think speaks to the strides that we want to make as an organization, but until we are able to secure our own accreditation. So that's also part of the reason for an extended open date.
Thank you.
So we will be a degree conferring institution.
Okay, 9 more minutes before we close out here. M. Lynn, you're recognized. M. Lynn, and you're muted. Is that a hand up? Miss Lynn, hi. Yes, you're muted though. Thank you.
I thought you were saying Anne Boleyn. Very strange. Hey, I am Mary Lynn. I was Mary Yakabuchi at Marlboro College. I was there on essentially full scholarship from 82 to 87. I didn't graduate, but I did go on to get an MFA from Goddard and have worked in, I've worked at and attended colleges which have the self-directed ethos and John Dewey-based philosophies of Marlboro College for most of my adult life. And I'm hoping that Democracy Prep will be open to learning from Marlboro College alums and faculty and folks who live in the community about self-directed education and the value of fostering curiosity and agency and independent projects beyond the typical capstone. There's something that happens to students who are able to really focus in on what their passion is and what their curiosity is. And I would like to also let the folks who are on this call know that there are organizations like the New American Baccalaureate Program that are working to create streamlined opportunities to get a bachelor's degree which do result in real world skills. And many of these folks are focused in New England and Friends of Marlboro College. And if anyone wants to join the conversation as an alum, as a former or a current faculty member, wants to join the conversation about creating new institutions that combine best practices and experimental approaches coming from that, please contact me. Please let me know. I'm on Facebook, Amy Tudor. I give you permission to give anyone my contact information and anyone else here who has that. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I hope that this conversation will keep Marlboro alive and will keep the best parts of Marlboro, the self-directed, passion-directed learning, and that, you know, old educators never die. They just keep looking for the next person who listen. Please do reach out to the community in Marlboro and see what there might be to offer as your conversation goes both ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Kayla, hi there.
Thanks, Jesse. Apologize for noise in the background. We are sitting here noticing that we're hearing from a lot of different people, and we're really excited to hear a lot of what the faculty are saying and get to know a lot of you just through this one call. I'm noticing that I'm not hearing much from Seth, and I think part of what we're wondering is, how do we get to know Seth better? And also, I feel that much of the critique that I'm hearing is actually directed towards Seth, and I'm not hearing much response from Seth. Yet I'm hearing most of his faculty step out in front of him. So I'm curious about all of that. And Seth and everyone at Democracy Prep or Democracy Builders or whatever iteration is coming now to Marlboro, I think it's just we want to work together and know what's coming and just make sure that it's safe for everyone involved and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Martin, you had a hand up and you're muted.
Sorry, how's that?
Gotcha.
People often like to listen to me talk when the microphone's muted, so I'm kind of used to that. I just want to say I totally agree with Adrian. I'm not going to, and the times that Adrian and I have agreed, you could probably count on one hand. But we're together completely on what he said previously, and I've got some grave concerns. I've done a lot of digging, but I don't want to talk about anything heavy. We've talked a lot about, or people have talked a lot about education. And education's important to me, as it is to all of you. And I had a quote here from Paul D. Schaefer, and he started a private school many years ago. I'm not sure where, maybe New York or maybe Pennsylvania. And his quotations always meant a lot to me. So I'd like to take about 15 seconds just to read this brief quote. He says, if that's all right, he says, the most important single influence in the life of a person is another person. We may say to our children, here is art, here is science, philosophy, mathematics, music, psychology, history, religion, and we may open innumerable doors along the corridors of living so that they will have a broad and even a minute acquaintance with these segments of life. But these introductions are not as important as knowing people whose characters and actions, personalities and words have grown after similar introductions and have become worthy of emulation. And for me, not being a Marlboro graduate of any kind, but this is what I've perceived in Marlboro, a community of 200 people, 200 students and faculty, where you have a chance to know everybody by name, and you get these personal introductions to real people that know you by name. And I'm not thrilled with what's coming in, but I'm still very distressed and not giving up about what's being kicked out. I just am, as many people are, I think I'm very unhappy about this. I can't imagine the pain that the teachers that have put in decades of their life into this college and the students that it became so important to them to just have this thing disregarded and disrespected with such extraordinary selfishness and callousness is just extraordinary. So I just want to say, and I'm finished now, but I just want to say, it's not just that I'm unhappy about what it's being replaced with, but what it's in the process of kicking out and contributing to that. So thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, we're at 8:20, but we have two more folks that have hands up, so I will recognize them before we adjourn. I would also say if you did not get a chance to speak and want to submit a comment in writing or any question, we'd be happy to pass that along and make that public. MarlboroSelectBoard@gmail.com. Okay, so Mike Cummings Jr., you're recognized, and I suspect you're muted as well.
Yes, I was, but I'm here. Thank you very much for taking the time to recognize me one more time. I'll be quick because I know everyone has things to do. I just wanted to point out, so there were some things that took me aback because after what Lindsay said, or sorry, Telling Truth said, we want to continue to question mistakes and quote unquote foul practices that Democracy Prep made in its beginning years. However, as Telling Truth said, you know, that they made mistakes as well in their beginning years. I don't think that it's fair to, you know, gravely criticize a school, a budding charter school in its first year for things that they did wrong, but then also like completely excuse yourself or Black and Brown and DP's mistakes that they make in their first months. You know, the two don't equate. If you're going to excuse yourself for one thing, you need to also recognize. And then additionally, just to point out the separation, Democracy Prep as a whole, I know this because my sister in her last year made tremendous strides to speak to faculty, from all the way from the superintendent Natasha Trivers to the teachers and principals at her individual school, to talk about change and to talk about things that weren't fair, or she thought, you know, practices weren't 100% and they could be changed. And the school took that and listened and hosted a board meeting with her, other students, and faculty in order to listen and understand how the school could change its practices to make sure that they were in the best interest for the students. And that is something that, you know, I'm not saying wouldn't have happened at the school when I was there, but definitely didn't happen. And I think that it's important to recognize that, because you can see the growth and development of the school as a network in its time from when I graduated in 2013 to when she did just this past June. So I think that we need to recognize that, yes, it wasn't perfect in its first years. And yes, you know, Seth Andrew and other people on staff may have made small mistakes, but the idea of democracy and the idea of Democracy Prep as a whole is to be able to learn from those mistakes, grow from them, and then continue to push them onto new projects, right? And so that's something that Degrees of Freedom is trying to do here, just like what Giselle said, that they had a meeting early in June, even before Black and Brown and DP even started. I know this because I was there, and we continue to talk about things that, you know, were an issue or could be an issue in not just Democracy Prep, but in society as a whole, and to make sure that we don't continue to perpetrate those instances. And so I just want to make sure that we understand, and that the Vermont community and everybody on this call understands, that the whole idea here is to continue to make positive change. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that that's exactly what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Vivian, you're recognized and you're muted, I suspect.
Can you hear me now?
Have you? Thanks.
Yeah, I am struck by two kinds of trauma here. You know, we have these degrees of freedom who are coming into our community and, you know, operating with some trauma going on. And then there are those of us who live here and who are alum, who have lost, you know, the beating heart of our community through a process that was not democratic, over which we had, you know, no control, let alone voice. So, you know, we're two traumatized communities meeting each other for the first time. And I'm wondering how we can do that and make it work. And I'm wondering, you know, how, if it's possible to paint a picture for the new folks in town of what Marlboro College, the physical plant, is to this community. It has never been just a college that's in an island in the middle of a little quaint town. It's a bus stop. It's where the children seek shelter from the rain and the cold and have their sports games and Christmas concerts. And, you know, how will we be welcomed there? We don't lock our doors here. And the doors at Marlboro are open 24/7. It's been our public library. It's been the fast internet in a world where many, many, many people are without that. And, you know, so I'm just wondering, how can we meet each other in this new place and share this facility in some new way that is not yet clear, but, you know, it's a real loss to us to think that it can be no more part of our lives. That's it.
Thank you, Vivian. And Ayana, did you just put a hand up?
Hi, yes. Just wanted to share really quickly. So my name is Ayana Mason, and I am a Democracy Prep alum. I think my former classmates and parents on the call have done such a great job at articulating the endless opportunities that Democracy Prep have extended for its students and community. The commitment to students is unmatched, and while some may not understand nor agree with the behavioral code, it is not racist nor is Seth Andrew. I think it is very important to be mindful of context and understand that Democracy Prep serves predominantly and previously only Black and Brown students. And so Black and Brown is a narrative of only a fraction of the Black and Brown community that Democracy Prep actually serves and have served. I won't speak for Seth, but I could only imagine the hurt that comes with being called a racist when you dedicated and sacrificed so much of your life to serving us. I personally decided to speak on behalf of Seth because of all the times he used his voice to create access for his students to establish their voice. Kayla asked about knowing more about Seth. Here's a glimmer. About 5 years ago, Seth traveled to Rhode Island and took 2 other alum and myself to dinner. After catching up with us about what we were doing and what our vision was, and also how he could assist us on our journey from making introductions to showing up, the conversation changed. Seth asked us about our unreserved experiences at Democracy Prep, the good, the bad, the ugly. He took time to reflect and then shared his idea of degrees of freedom. He asked how our friends that weren't successful at Democracy Prep in its early years could have been supported. He asked about how our friends not at Democracy Prep or a similar school could have been supported. His desire to truly understand our experiences and the experience of our friends and our community and how he and his team could better serve them has not come out of racism nor out of savior complex, but out of a sincere commitment and passion to change the world through education by building active citizens that continue to be mindful contributors to society. Democracy Prep and Democracy Builders has been a learning community. No, it's not perfect, and yes, there's room for growth. I believe in that growth because I believe and have experienced the dedication of Democracy Prep. That dedication to be their best is a commitment to continuing to learn and amplify community voice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Jean, why don't you take us out? Jean Boardman's recognized.
Thank you. I'm a member of the community in the center of town, Jean Boardman at the Whetstone Inn. And I just wanted to thank Erin and Mary Lynn for their positive feeling toward the fact that this experiment is not unlike the beginning of Marlboro College that managed to survive all these years, and that we certainly need to follow up on the questions that the Black and Brown group have. But I would like to have a lot of the community members be able to welcome and help the group that's coming in so that we have a educational institution that is trying to be different but supporting what is happening to all our higher education institutions. Every college is in trouble now, and a new way of looking at education for groups of people seems to me like something we should certainly try to support and help while keeping an eye on the concerns that the people who have concerns are supported also.
Thank you, Jean. Okay, I guess I'll say just in closing that this is difficult and messy, and I think we're all trying to figure out how best to heal as a town and determine next steps. And I guess what I would say is I would encourage the Degrees of Freedom design team, and I thank them for their participation, everyone who participated tonight, to be communicative, to help us figure out next steps, appropriate next steps. And this could very likely happen outside of the purview of the select board. And I think there's the Council on Rural Development is a likely partner who might be receptive to helping facilitate community dialogues around these very messy, very complicated conversations. And so I just thank you all for being willing to come to the table, and look forward to communicating with you down the line. I will share Any questions that were submitted over the course of this chat, either in this chat bar, or if you want to submit questions to the Marlboro Select Board, we can compile those, make those public, and share with the Degrees of Freedom team, and ask that they respond by our next Select Board meeting if that's feasible. Again, I thank you all, and I will make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Jesse, for giving us the time to speak. And I just wanted to sort of also state that all, both the Degrees of Freedom team, members who are into people who are in solidarity with Black and Brown and DP, and members of the Marlboro community, that we all have a common goal, and that is to serve, to ensure that the lives and the psychological well-being, the academic prowess, the economic future of Black and Brown people that future is bright. And so we do look forward to having opportunity for open dialogue as we have a year-long runway between now and September 2021 to bring the school into fruition. And we truly look forward to the opportunity to partner with everyone who is interested in participating in that process.
Thank you. And was it 2021 or 22?
This is 2021. Yes, we have 1 year between now.
Got
I'm like, it's school years.
Got you. Good. Okay, so there's a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you all.
You guys have it. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Thank you. So long.
Thanks, Jesse and Aaron.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming. Have a good evening.